Welcome back to the dark side of Michael Jackson's This Is It. If you haven't seen parts 1 and 2, I highly recommend watching those first as everything is building up to our final curtain call. Now this is technically part 2.5, a continuation of part 2 that'll give you some extra context before diving into part 3. Up until now, we've only focused on our main cast, key players like AEG executives Randy Phillips and Paul Gongaware, as well as Michael Jackson's managers Dr. Tomei Tomei and Frank DeLeo. Toward the end of part 2, we were introduced to our director/showrunner, Kenny Ortega, but there were many more people working behind the scenes to get Michael ready for these shows. People like his personal chef, Kai Chase, his personal trainer, Lou Ferrigno, and of course his doctor, Dr. Conrad Murray, the man who would ultimately be responsible for taking Michael Jackson's life. Welcome to the casting call, darling.
I just think that because he wanted to make the greatest comeback, that he has so much pressure on himself, and I think his body just gave out because it was just too much. It was too much for a short period of time.
No matter what he wanted, someone would give it to him.
Tell her that one side of my body is hot, and one side of my body is cold.
Contrary to what has been said, I did not kill Michael Jackson.
There still may be a chance he can rise to the occasion if we get him the help he needs.
Couldn't anybody help him? Couldn't anybody intervene? Couldn't anybody do anything?
A casting call is a pre-production process where a producer, director, or casting director posts a notice inviting performers to audition for specific roles in a production. In this video, we'll be getting to know the people Michael Jackson personally selected to be by his side for the This Is It tour, most of whom he had worked with for years, if not decades prior. So get your tea brewing, have some extra on standby, and grab those towels, because we are about to be spilling hunty. The first role we're casting is for our doctor. The contenders for this part are Dr. Arnold Klein, Nurse Cherilyn Lee, and of course, Dr. Conrad Murray. Before we dive into the discourse about them, I want to drop a quote from one of my favorite doctors, Dr. Gregory House, who wisely said, "Everybody lies." I know a lot of us don't want to believe anything these doctors have to say about Michael Jackson, but buried beneath their lies, there's often a glimmer of truth. So take everything with a grain of salt and use your own discernment. Oh wow. A shady disclaimer? This early in? Won't he do it? Let's start with Dr. Arnold Klein.
And to the doctors you suspect are complicit in the addiction of someone like Michael Jackson,
Absolutely.
what do you say?
Well, I say they're criminals. I say that anyone who makes someone an addict or gives person potentially dangerous substances directly to them to use, like a propofol, is a criminal.
I've already talked about Dr. Klein quite a bit throughout parts 1 and 2. In part 1, we learned that Dr. Klein was the dermatologist of the stars, treating numerous celebrities like Elizabeth Taylor, Cher, Carrie Fisher, Dolly Parton, and of course Michael Jackson. Is that why all those women kind of look the same? He was also the only doctor to diagnose MJ with lupus sometime after Thriller around 1983 or 1984.
I met Michael because someone had brought him into my office. I walked into the room with Michael, and I took one look at him. I said, "You have lupus erythematosus."
Because of that, MJ would regularly see him, and the two developed a friendship that lasted until his death in 2009. Towards the end of part 2, we started uncovering the true nature of MJ's visits with Dr. Klein. As the This Is It concerts approached, MJ wanted to look his best on the big stage and become the new Michael. Dr. Klein then went on a mission to rebuild MJ's face, as he stated here.
I was sort of rebuilding his face because he had severe acne scarring. He had scarring from having a lot of cosmetic surgery. And my expertise is like it is with every one of my patients. My patients are my treasures. And I was rebuilding his face so he looked much more normal. I mean, contrary to what people said, he could not take off his nose. His nose was attached, but it looked too small. And I just was trying to get him ready to do the concert because in the way he looked in his face, he wanted to be absolutely as perfect as it could be.
To achieve this, Dr. Klein treated Michael with Restylane, a dermal filler, Botox used for smoothing wrinkles and fine lines, and various other treatments aimed at promoting eyelash growth, skin health, and facial reconstruction. These treatments were later revealed in bills sent to AEG totaling over $48,000 across 179 treatments between March and June of 2009. Wait a minute! What's this on April 25th? $7,500 for a weekend call? For someone you say is your good friend. Child, you ain't no friend of mine. You ain't no friend of mine. If we take a closer look at the bill, we see several things listed as IM injections, meaning intramuscular injections. An IM injection in this case is a common billing code for Demerol, an opioid medication that is used to treat moderate to severe pain and is highly addictive.
I once, on occasion gave him Demerol to sedate him, and that was about the strongest medicine I ever used.
You are saying you never gave him the kind of drugs that would have fueled addiction. You're saying that?
No, I have to tell you that I have sedated him in the past. You have to hear from me. I've sedated him in the past because I've had to put him through very painful procedures. You understand? There was nothing wrong with the manner I treated Michael because what I had to do is restructure it for an individual who had lupus, who had terrible acne scarring his face, and rebuild the structure of a face. When you do this, at times you have to sedate him with very mild levels of drugs, nothing to the likes of what they're describing.
There's nothing inherently wrong with administering a mild sedative during a procedure, especially considering the types of treatments Dr. Klein performed on Michael were painful, often involving numerous tiny injections around his eyes and nose over the course of an hour or more. However, there was nothing mild about the amount of Demerol Klein was giving him. First and foremost, we have to remember that Michael Jackson had a history of struggling with Demerol addiction. In fact, he prematurely ended his Dangerous World Tour in 1993 to seek rehabilitation treatment for it.
As you may already know, after my tour ended, I remain out of the country undergoing treatment for a dependency on pain medication. This medication was initially prescribed to see the excruciating pain that I was suffering after recent reconstructive surgery on my scalp.
From then on, there were periods where MJ was completely clean from the drug, but I believe it became a problem again after the MJ and Friends concerts in 1999 when he suffered a severe back injury. Because he had used Demerol on and off for years, his tolerance was high, meaning a mild dose wouldn't have been enough to sedate him and have a therapeutic effect. But what exactly is considered a mild dose? For an adult, depending on the severity of the pain, it's typically anywhere from 50 to 150 milligrams, not to exceed 600 milligrams in a 24-hour period, according to Dr. William B. Van Valen, who treated MJ from 2001 to 2005. During the 2013 Jackson vs. AEG trial, he stated that he would typically administer a 200 milligram dose. Now, while that's already on the higher end, it's important to acknowledge that this was shortly after MJ's back injury. So in this instance, a higher dose could be considered appropriate. If we take another look at Dr. Klein's billing statements, specifically for April 2009, we can see a period where MJ was visiting Klein's office almost daily for an entire week. During the 2011 Conrad Murray trial, Klein's medical records from that month were revealed, shedding more light on the frequency and intensity of these treatments. Looking at April 17th, we see multiple intramuscular IM injections listed. Notably, MJ's usual 200 milligram dose was increased to 300 milligrams.
Again, Botox, this time to the groin for excessive perspiration. 10:30 a.m., Demerol 200 milligrams. And midazolam 1 milligram IM left upper quadrant. 11:30 a.m. Demerol 100 milligrams IM right upper quadrant.
Now, as you see, Dr. Wallman, as you see these days progress, we go from 200 to 300. Is that significant to you as an addiction medicine specialist?
Yes.
And of what significance is that to you?
It implies that he's no longer getting a therapeutic effect from the prior dosage, and this is consistent with the development of tolerance.
But wait, let's take a look at the medical records from April 22nd.
11:30 a.m., Demerol 200 milligrams, and midazolam 1 milligram IM left upper quadrant. 12:30 p.m., 100 milligrams of Demerol, and midazolam 1 milligram IM right upper quadrant, and then at 1:30 Demerol 75 milligrams IM left upper quadrant.
Dr. Wallman, can we say that this further represents an escalation in the use of Demerol?
This is a large dose, and yes, there is evidence for increasing dosage.
This dose, this 375 milligrams that were given that afternoon or morning, is that the kind of dose you would expect for Botox?
Well, is it?
No!
For the girls in the balcony, let me repeat what Dr. Waldman just read. Dr. Arnold Klein administered 375 milligrams of Demerol to Michael Jackson over a 90-minute period, 7 times the recommended dose. This pattern of extreme dosing continued throughout April and into May 2009. Dr. Klein quite literally created a dependency by steadily increasing the amount MJ needed to achieve the desired effect. As Dr. Waldman pointed out, this escalation proves that MJ's usual 200 milligram dose was no longer enough to produce the intended therapeutic effect. Out of the 179 procedures Klein performed on MJ, 51 involved administering Demerol. But let's be freaking for real. There's gotta be more going on here, right? Because why was Dr. Klein giving him that much Demerol for Botox and Ristylane? Like, I get that Michael had a low pain tolerance, but as Keith Sweat won't say, something just ain't right. Why do I keep singing, y'all? I don't know. This brings me to my next point, insomnia. It's no secret that Michael struggled with insomnia, a sleep disorder that made it difficult for him to fall or stay asleep. He had dealt with it for decades, and during tour cycles, it always got worse. It's also well documented that MJ sought out physicians to help him manage his sleep issues, one of them being anesthesiologist Dr. Neil Ratner, who administered propofol to MJ from time to time so he could sleep. I covered this extensively in part 1. Now y'all see what the savage is cooking, right? With MJ heavily preparing for the This Is It shows, rehearsing almost daily, the insomnia was bound to creep back in. That's why I'm inclined to believe that MJ wasn't just going to Klein's office for cosmetic treatments, he was also going there to get some additional sleep outside of his treatments with Dr. Conrad Murray. Allegedly. I mean, do I really have to say allegedly now? Dr. Klein's been dead for like 10 years now. Now, Demerol itself is not a sleep medication, but one of its side effects is drowsiness, which would explain why MJ always seemed groggy and out of it when we saw him leaving Klein's office.
Yeah, questions like that. Are you ever have a concert, Michael? Hey, Michael, shoot the letters or candy there.
What?
Yo, Michael! Assignment or operation?
Bro, what are you talking about, man?
Michael, millions of milkshakes! Hey, Michael, are you gonna... How's your skin? Halfway, guys. Make it halfway. Watch out.
So, did Dr. Klein know that Michael Jackson was struggling with insomnia during this time, or struggled with it at all?
And we are told that he weighed about 125 pounds, that he was in enormous pain, he was having trouble sleeping. Did you know of these things?
No, I didn't know. There was no trouble sleeping in my office, okay?
Well, of course there was no trouble sleeping in your office. You gave him 375 milligrams of highly addictive opiates, you chicken fried fuck.
Did he have an insomnia problem?
Not that I knew of, except that once we went on tour with him, we were in Hawaii, he couldn't get to sleep, so me and my whole office went to sleep in the room with him. So I never knew that he had a problem with sleep until this whole tour came up, or basically this problem with sleep at that time. I do know that he did certain, local anesthesia, but this is not something we discussed repeatedly, except I just got shocked. He assured me he'd stop.
And he never asked you to administer it, did he?
I mean, that kind of sounds like an insomnia problem that you may have known about to me, personally. Plus, Klein knew MJ was getting something on the history tour.
I knew at one point that he was using Diprovan when he was on tour in Germany. And so he was using it with an anesthesiologist to go to sleep at night.
Did he not just say that he knew MJ was using Diprovan in Germany on the history tour with an anesthesiologist to sleep at night? Which, if we use our context clues, might dictate that MJ had a sleeping problem, since he was aware of it happening more than just that time in Hawaii he mentioned. You expired jar of mayonnaise. Just as I mentioned back in part 1, we have to acknowledge that Michael was not always forthcoming about the treatments he was receiving from all his doctors. LOVE though.
Well, why are you boring me? I'm right.
Because that's my man. Don't get it twisted. So there is a slight chance that Dr. Klein really wasn't aware of MJ's sleeping problems or his propofol treatments with Dr. Murray. But let's be for real. As someone who claimed to be one of MJ's closest friends, had known him since the 80s, and saw him almost consistently throughout the final months of his life, it's hard to believe he wouldn't have noticed anything off. Then again, MJ was out of it for most of those appointments, right? Anyway, Demerol was not a factor in Michael Jackson's death since it was not in his autopsy. So if that's the case, why is any of this important? It matters and is important because at some point, MJ stopped receiving treatment from Dr. Klein, allegedly because AEG made him, which would have sent him into opioid withdrawal. And this could explain why he was struggling even more than usual with insomnia, ultimately leading him to seek out propofol as a solution. So Dr. Arnold Klein, you are dismissed. Let's move on to our second contender for the doctor, Nurse Cherilyn Lee. Some of you might be wondering who this woman is, but the reason you might not be as familiar with her as the others is because, as the kids on the Clock app say, she stood on business and told Michael Jackson no when everyone else told him yes. Nurse Cherilyn Lee refers to herself as a holistic healthcare practitioner and a certified natural healthcare professional. But let's be crystal clear. She is a registered nurse, holds a PhD in holistic nutrition, and at the time of the This Is It preparations, specialized in IV nutrition. Nurse Lee stated that she met Michael in late January 2009 through his chief of security, Faheem Muhammad. Surely she isn't referring to this Faheem Muhammad, right? Oh, not the diddler, ew!
Faheem Muhammad gave me a call and he said that Michael's children had a slight cold and could I come to the home to see them? And I said, well, keep in mind, I'm not a pediatrician and I'm not a physician. So he said, no, he's aware of that. I told him who you were, how you have helped so many people in the community. And he gave him a little bit about my background and the things I have done as far as healthcare. And that's how I met him. And then I set an appointment and I went to the home to see the children and Michael was there.
After Nurse Lee treated the children, MJ took an interest in her work and opened up about his struggle with midday fatigue over the past few months. He wanted to focus on boosting his energy naturally through nutrition and food. Now, let's break down the timeline. Their first encounter was in late January 2009, right around the time MJ signed his agreement with AEG. At this point, the tour hadn't even been announced yet and production hadn't started. Shortly after, Nurse Lee saw him again on February 1st and 2nd to complete paperwork, run blood tests, and gather information to tailor her treatments for him. By February 3rd, she officially began working with MJ.
All right, and what treatment plan did you have him on?
I actually provide him with a very high concentrated smoothies that I was going in the mornings. That's why the visits were kind of close together. So he said he didn't really know how to make them, so I said I would come and make them for you. So it's a wonderful kind of sports, high protein smoothies full of nutrition, and it's actually in my report exactly what it is and what was in it. I gave him a B12 shot. Nutritional IVs, I started him with that also.
On February 4th, MJ met with Dr. David Slavitt, who examined him on behalf of AEG to secure cancellation insurance for the tour. According to Slavitt, MJ was in good health with only mild nasal congestion and an allergy to the sun. The following day, on February 5th, Nurse Lee received the results from the blood test she had run on MJ. The results showed that he was hypoglycemic, meaning he had low blood sugar, and deficient in folic acid, vitamin B, and vitamin D3, all of which could have been contributing to his chronic fatigue and insomnia. So if MJ had all that going on, why didn't Slavitt clock it? Simple, because he didn't perform a comprehensive exam, just a standard physical. The sole purpose of his evaluation was to give AEG something to present to insurance carriers, proving MJ was technically in good health. That's it. Meanwhile, Nurse Lee's approach was entirely different. Before starting any treatments, her protocol required a full assessment, including a detailed questionnaire and blood work, something AEG should have done from the jump. But I digress, darling. Now, let's fast forward to the end of February, specifically February 27th, just a week before MJ was set to fly to London to announce the This Is It concerts. Let me remind the girls in the balcony that this was the time when Randy Phillips and Paul Gongaware were going back and forth debating whether MJ would even show up. That little fiasco ended with Paul stating, "We let Mikey know just what it will cost him in terms of him making money, and then we go with or without him in London. We cannot be forced into stopping this," which Michael will try to do because he is lazy and constantly changes his mind to fit his immediate wants.
So February 27th, I actually drew blood again because I wanted to see the treatment plan that he was on, how effective it had been. So it was very effective, and he was doing a lot better.
During the 2013 Jackson vs. AEG trial, when Nurse Lee was asked if MJ said he was feeling better after taking her advice and improving under her care, she stated, "Improving his eating, yes, along with a very well-balanced nutritional smoothie. He looked healthier, yes. I mean, even to the point in the early part of March, before he left to go out of town, even in the media, they said he looked great. We've never seen him look so good." After Michael returned from London, he met with Nurse Lee again on March 9th. This time, he started bringing up his inability to sleep more frequently. Back in February, he had mentioned it briefly, but Nurse Lee initially chalked it up to his body adjusting to the treatments and cutting caffeine from his diet. However, by March, it was becoming clear that his sleep issues were more than just an adjustment phase.
And on the 9th, he was complaining of low energy and well-being. Is that right?
When he came back, yes. Said he was a little tired.
We could assume Michael was dealing with some jet lag and adjusting back to Pacific Standard Time, so nothing about his sleep troubles seemed too out of the ordinary at first. But in the coming weeks, things started picking up. Tickets for the tour went on sale, MJ was seeing Dr. Klein more frequently, and by March 28th, he officially began rehearsals for This Is It. Around this time, Nurse Lee noted that MJ's biggest complaint was exhaustion. Long days were wearing him down. While he appreciated her treatments and the natural sleep remedies, he was starting to doubt they would be enough. By Easter Sunday, April 12th, it became painfully clear just how serious MJ's struggle with sleep had become.
On that day, April 12, 2009, can you tell us what his complaint was when you came out to see him?
He said his complaint was, I have a problem sleeping, and all the natural remedies and everything you're doing is not working. When I need sleep, I need to go to sleep right away.
She then discussed sleep hygiene with him, things like keeping his cell phone away from his bed, turning off lights and music, and creating a better sleep environment. In fact, she even stayed with him one night while he slept. To quote her 2013 testimony during the Jackson vs. AEG trial, "The longest he slept, I think, was 5 hours, but he wanted to sleep. He just got to the place like in the end of March and early April where he just seemed like he really needed something more. This is why I said, let's try everything." And we did. Nurse Lee suggested bringing in a sleep specialist to conduct a sleep study, since that wasn't her area of expertise. She also wanted to run a few more tests to check for any deficiencies she could treat to help improve his sleep. But MJ shut it down and was like,
"Ain't nobody got time for that."
On April 13th, 15th, and 17th, MJ made multiple trips to Dr. Klein's office. As we've already established, these visits involved high doses of Demerol. Given that he was going nearly every other day at this point, his body was constantly cycling between adjusting to the drug and then withdrawing from it. One of Demerol's major side effects? Restlessness, making it nearly impossible for him to sleep naturally. April 19th would be the last day Nurse Lee saw Michael Jackson in person. That day, she visited him twice, once in the morning and again in the evening. During their morning visit, MJ once again expressed his frustration over his inability to sleep and his growing need for help, to quote her 2013 Jackson vs. AEG trial testimony. Well, what he said that morning is, "I'm very tired," and he seemed like something was going on. He wasn't quite himself. I mean, he was very jovial, very up, very happy, but that morning, he just didn't kind of seem that way. I remember being in his bedroom and I could look out the window and see the kids outside under the tree. We had lunch that day too, but he wasn't quite himself. Not himself, he just seemed really stressed or something, you know? He said at certain points he was just under a lot of pressure to finish rehearsals and stuff. And he said, "I've got to get a good night's sleep so I could do this. I've got to get a good night's sleep." This was the moment Michael first brought up propofol, suggesting that either Nurse Lee or an anesthesiologist administer it to him to help him sleep.
Michael Jackson wanted a medical attendant to give him an IV drip of Diprovan.
Yes.
Just so he could sleep.
Yes.
Scary.
Very scary. This is how he started doing. I had this medicine before. It worked for me before. And I said, well, you know, and then he says the name and I didn't understand. I said, well, who gave it to you? My doctor. And he was so adamant. Like, he totally believed that his doctor said, this is safe. He said, this is
Did he say what doctor?
He wouldn't tell me. I said, who is the doctor? And if he gave it to you, where is he? I mean, why are you asking me? You know, he said, oh, I don't know where he is. It was a long time ago, but I know this worked for me. And he actually sat there and he said, I'm telling you, when I have that IV in my hand, when I have it in my hand, and he just kind of went on his arm, when it drips in my body, the first drop, I'm asleep. And all I want to do is sleep. You know, I've watched my children, they're sleeping. You know, I just want to go to sleep. I want to sleep 8 hours so I could be refreshed the next day. He said, find me an anesthesiologist. I don't care how much money they want. find me an anesthesiologist to be with me here overnight and give me this IV. So it's his time. I didn't know what it was, and I stepped away from him. I called a friend of mine who was a medical doctor, and I said, "What is this medicine?" He said, "Why are you asking about that?" He said, "That's the medication they use in ICU. I look at you, Michael, and I've been around you long enough now. I love you as family. I would not give this to anyone. This is not a safe medicine. Please don't take this." And I said, "The problem with you telling me you want to be knocked out," those were his words, "is that you might not wake up the next morning. You don't want to do that."
After Nurse Lee tried to convince Michael that propofol wasn't the right option, she headed back to her office to prepare a nutrient cocktail, hoping to try again with him that evening. She also grabbed a large medical reference book called the Physician's Desk Reference, PDR. Her goal was to show Michael the side effects of propofol and continue to steer him away from using it at home. Per her 2013 AEG trial testimony, the evening visit with MJ went something like this. "I went to the PDR and I showed him the side effects of the Diprivan, aka propofol, and that it is something he didn't want to do at home, and he kept saying, 'You don't understand. Doctor said it's okay.' I said, 'I understand that. I understand what you're telling me, but look at the side effects.' So I told him, I said, 'I know doctors have told you there are side effects, but you don't understand. There are a multitude of side effects with this.' We went back and forth for a few minutes because he was very persistent to try to explain to me how I'm going to be safe. Eventually, Nurse Lee administered her IV nutrition treatment to MJ, and as I mentioned earlier, this was also the night she stayed with him to monitor his sleep. From the evening of April 19th into the morning of April 20th, he only slept for about 5 hours and woke up pissed. Per her 2013 AEG trial testimony, he woke up and I'm sitting on the sofa and he stood up on the bed and he looked at me at 4:30 in the morning. It kind of scared me. I didn't know what I should do because it really startled me when he woke up and just stood there and stared at me. And he said, 'I told you I cannot sleep all night.' And then he jumped off the bed and ran to the bathroom. After he returned, their conversation continued. I said, 'Well, maybe you're waking up because you need to go to the restroom at night. You know, there's certain conditions that happen with men over 40, enlarged prostate hypoplasia, that will cause them to get up at night to go to the bathroom.' So I said, 'Why don't we check that out and see if that's one of the problems?' Technically, she's not wrong, because if we look at Michael Jackson's autopsy, he had nodular prostatic hyperplasia, which essentially means an enlarged prostate. But I don't want to talk about this because I'm 5 years old and yucky, boy body parts, ew. Anyway, he said, 'I know you want to check out all these things. I know you want to do this and I know you want to do that, but I just need to have some sleep.' He was very agitated at this point. He said, 'I tried to tell you I could not sleep all night. All I need is something that's going to help me to sleep. I just need Diprivan to help me sleep so I can sleep all night. I have a very big day today. My day is going to be destroyed. I need to have sleep.' After all of that, Michael gave Nurse Lee a hug and told her to get to stepping, since she wasn't willing to cooperate with what he felt like he needed at the time. Now y'all know Mr. Jackson is my man and all, but honestly, Nurse Lee did the right thing. Any doctor who'd suggest propofol was safe and administer it in a home setting without proper knowledge or precautions deserves to have their medical license revoked expeditiously. This whole interaction just feels like MJ was pouting and throwing a tantrum, standing on the bed at 4:30 in the morning like a child. And while it's frustrating to witness, I can empathize with him. He was under an immense amount of stress. AEG was on his case to deliver these shows after advancing him so much money. It had been over a decade since he performed, and it felt like everyone was hoping he'd fail. Even some fans were doubting if he'd even make it to that first show. And on top of all of that, he was raising 3 kids and trying to meet all of their needs while being a single father. Honestly, I don't think I'd be able to sleep either. With Nurse Lee no longer treating Michael, we start to see a spike in his visits to Dr. Klein's office. Specifically during April, he saw Dr. Klein on the 21st, 22nd, 23rd, 25th, 27th, 28th, and 30th. I did mention earlier that April 19th was the last time Nurse Lee saw Michael Jackson in person. However, on June 21st, just 4 days before his death, she received a phone call from Michael's security.
Well, when he called me, I had not seen him for 3 months. When he called me on Father's Day, early afternoon, and was telling me his symptoms, through the staff there. And he said, the staff was very, very anxious and said, Michael wants to know if you can come out and see him right away. He wants to know, can you see him right away? He's not feeling well. And I could hear Michael in the background, Mr. Jackson, and he was saying, one side of my body is real cold and one side of my my body is real hot and I don't know what's wrong. I don't know what's wrong. And immediately I said, Michael, I'm in Florida. You need to go ahead and go to the hospital. This is very serious at this point. You need to go to the hospital. Again, I hadn't seen him in 3 months, but this is a call that I received on Sunday.
Now, everything surrounding this time period will be covered in part 3, but here's some quick additional context. On June 18th, MJ was allegedly ordered by Dr. Conrad Murray to stop seeing Dr. Klein. The next day, June 19th, MJ showed up to rehearsal incoherent, disoriented, and clearly under the influence of something or detoxing from something, prompting Kenny Ortega to send him home to rest. Then, on June 20th, Dr. Murray, Kenny Ortega, and Randy Phillips had a tense meeting at Michael's house, basically telling him to get his sugar honey iced tea and gather bitch. So why was half of Michael's body hot and the other half cold? Well, after being ordered to stop seeing Dr. Klein days prior, where he had been receiving Demerol, this could have been a sign of withdrawal. On top of that, Dr. Murray was allegedly trying to wean Michael off of propofol during this time, so MJ wasn't getting any real sleep and hadn't for months. He was also using stimulants like caffeine and ephedrine to get through the day, but at night was given sedatives like lorazepam, midazolam, and diazepam to help him sleep. All of these substances were found in his system during his autopsy. The constant fluctuation between stimulants and depressants likely caused serious stress on his nervous system. Propofol specifically can suppress nervous system function and reduce the body's ability to regulate temperature. This could explain why in the This Is It film you see MJ bundled up in layers of clothing while the dancers are wearing much lighter outfits, and why in between songs, according to Karen Faye, he was curled up in a blanket near a heater in the middle of June. But I digress. When Nurse Lee got the call, she started to suspect that MJ had somehow found someone reckless enough to give him propofol for sleep in his home. But who could that be? Ladies and gentlemen, please meet our actor for the big stupid idiot. Role of the doctor. Dr. Conrad Murray. Dr. Conrad Murray was a cardiologist, and someone I've avoided talking about until now, mainly because this man pissed me off so bad, y'all. I wanted this series to focus on AEG and what went on during the daytime preparations for This Is It. Most of Murray's interactions with Michael happened at night, after he got home from rehearsal. But like it or not, Murray played a significant role in Michael Jackson's final months. And for the sake of piecing everything together, leaving him out wouldn't be right, she said begrudgingly.
I'm so sorry for that laddie who hasn't got a daddy. He's a little boy that Santa Claus forgot.
Somebody come get this man! So how did MJ get mixed up with Murray? Let's rewind to 2006. At the time, MJ's kids were recovering from a cold. Paris in particular wasn't getting any better. According to one of MJ's personal security guards, Bill Whitfield, MJ was worried she might have the flu. To quote his book Remember the Time, Protecting Michael Jackson in His Final Days, Paris didn't get better. Her cold wouldn't go away, and Mr. Jackson was worried she was coming down with the flu. We couldn't go to the emergency room, and Mr. Jackson didn't trust going back to some strange office. He wanted a doctor who would come to the house, so the word was put out there to find a private physician who made house calls. I was given a name and told when to expect him. On the scheduled night, the silver BMW 745i pulled up to the driveway, and a tall, slender gentleman stepped out. He was wearing light blue medical scrubs. He walked up to the gate and introduced himself. "I'm Dr. Conrad Murray," he said. "I'm here for a visit." We walked to the front of the house, and I rang the bell and we waited. I could see the silhouette of Mr. Jackson through the glass as he came over toward us. He opened the door and I said, "Mr. Jackson, this is Dr. Murray. Dr. Murray, this is Mr. Jackson."
I first met him in 2006 when a patient friend who was a security guard with him asked that I see him as a request because he was not feeling well. He wanted to see a doctor.
And when you first started attending, seeing Michael Jackson in 2006, what was that for?
There was a family flu illness between himself and his children. They were coughing and had a runny nose, and they felt dehydrated, and they were not really getting enough rest at that time. I met Michael Jackson as a referral. One of my patients, who was a security guard for his detail, stated that there was a celebrity in the nearby area I had 3 children who were not doing very well. They were ill. I would say a very undernourished, gaunt, feeble, generally weak person. But then, he also had a viral illness that accompanied with that of the children. I felt he was significantly dehydrated and he required hydration. So he could have appeared a little worse than he actually would have been, but very, very thin. I had been his personal physician since 2006, actually with the inception of that call, and thereafter it continued. When I became his personal physician for the London tour, that was something different. That's where I was asked to give up my practices, which I had built up for a number of years, and there was more than one practice.
Don't let Murray fool you into thinking he was upset about sacrificing his medical practices to care for Michael Jackson full-time. He wasn't that upset. In fact, he admitted to being very excited at first, seeing it as the opportunity of a lifetime. Not only would he be getting to travel abroad with the biggest pop star in the world, he would also be getting paid a hefty salary to do so. However, according to his absolutely dreadful and absurd autobiography, This Is It, The Secret Lives of Dr. Conrad Murray and Michael Jackson, the money didn't matter to him. I did not need that shitty ass job. I was doing fine on my own. No amount of money could make me sell my soul. Money does help, that's for sure. But there's so much that it cannot buy. It can't buy you happiness, good health, peace of mind, nor fulfillment, and more.
Boy, if you don't...
Child, Dr. Murray definitely needed that job and was not doing fine on his own. The gag is, at the time of the This Is It preparations, Murray was deep in debt, and honestly, he had been for years. He filed for bankruptcy in 2002, and by 2008, he had racked up over $600,000 in court judgments for medical equipment and unpaid rent for his practices in Texas and Nevada. On top of that, he had unpaid child support for a few of his 7 children, delinquent taxes, defaulted student loans, and even a foreclosure on his home.
Insufficient funds, you ain't got no money. Woo.
Hold on, girl. Cause I know you not just gonna bypass the fact that Murray has a DV charge on his record too. What you talking about, Willis? Back in February 1994, Murray was arrested and charged with DV involving his then girlfriend. The case even went to trial, but he was acquitted. Say you swear. Yeah, he pleaded no contest. Very on brand for him since he refuses to take accountability for anything he does. He was on probation for a while too, and it made it harder for him to maintain his medical license. You know, since a lot of states frown upon criminal records, especially violent offenses. Tea. But what does this actually have to do with anything? Like, what does it prove? I mean, it wasn't even mentioned at all to my knowledge during the 2011 Conrad Murray trial or the 2013 Jackson vs. AEG trial. Girl, it further proves that Murray had a documented history of reckless behavior despite his defense team trying to paint him as this innocent, compassionate doctor that got caught up in a bad situation. I mean, I know we don't know all the details, but the bottom line is, this man should have never been hired to care for Michael Jackson. And AEG might have found this out if they had done a background check. Oh, wait, but I don't think you've gotten there yet. Continue to pop off, Queen. Back to the money problems.
Hide the money, y'all. There's poor people around. With your broke ass.
So for him to sit here and act like the money wasn't a factor in his decision and that he didn't need it doesn't make sense, pesos, or dollars. Murray constantly boasted about building up 2 medical practices in different states. So why would he just shut them down if he wasn't going to be paid something significant to do so? Now let's fast forward to late April 2009 when the talks of Murray becoming MJ's full-time doctor really started to pick up. Through our discussion about Nurse Cherilyn Lee, we learned that MJ's need for sleep was becoming urgent towards the end of April as rehearsals intensified. He asked her for propofol to help him sleep, but she gave him a full list of reasons why it was inappropriate and dangerous for him to use, especially in a home setting. However, MJ didn't want to hear all that. It was convinced that propofol was the only thing that would help him sleep. He needed someone who could not only help replenish his fluids and maintain his stamina, but also someone willing to help him get the rest he needed to attend rehearsals and make it through the London shows. That someone was Dr. Conrad Murray.
I was called by Mr. Jackson, assistant. His name is Amir. Brother Amir. And he said Mr. Jackson wanted to speak with me, and then he mentioned that the first time, because I'd seen him for a while, that they were going to be doing the concert tours in England, and Mr. Jackson would very much like me to be part of of the trip and to be there for the concerts. And when I agreed to that, and I said, well, I need more details about that. And that was basically the gist of the question.
Paul Gongaware recalled MJ coming up to him one day at Center Staging and telling him he wanted to take Dr. Murray to London, to quote his 2013 Jackson versus AEG trial testimony. Well, he said he wanted Dr. Murray in London, and I said to him, why don't we get a doctor over there? Someone who's licensed over there, knows all the best people. If there's a problem, he'll know how to get people right away, and let's do that. And he just said, no. And then he said, this is the machine. We have to take care of the machine. And I think what he meant by that was his brain could create the show, but his body had to deliver it every night. He said, this is the machine. We have to take care of the machine. I want Conrad. And that was the end of the discussion. But wait a second. Why did MJ suddenly become so adamant about wanting Dr. Conrad Murray? Almost out of nowhere. Sure, Murray had been his personal physician on and off for a few years, but what was the urgency this time? I mean, I think it's because MJ knew Murray was willing to give him propofol, unlike Nurse Lee and other doctors who refused. In fact, by April 6, 2009, Murray had already started securing propofol and other medications to begin treating Michael.
On April 6, 2009, we know there was a shipment of propofol to Nicole Alvarez's address. And in that shipment were 10 bottles of the large 100 milliliter bottles, 1,000 milligrams of propofol each. There were also 25 of the 20 milliliter bottles in this first shipment of April 6, 2009. This first shipment, Conrad Murray's first order of business, resulted in a shipment of 15,000 milligrams of propofol to the apartment of Nicole Alvarez. But the shipments did not end with just that first shipment.
Subsequently, after Paul's conversation with Michael, he reached out to Dr. Murray to negotiate a deal and see how much he wanted for the job. Initially, Murray asked for $5 million, saying that he needed to close multiple clinics and lay off staff. And, well, Paul Gongaware was pretty much like...
Yeah, immediately no. Immediately no. Immediately no. Like, instantly, I was like, yeah, no.
And just so we're clear, it is Conrad Murray who said, I need $5 million a year for my services, correct?
That's correct.
You testified that in your experience, it is not unusual to have an artist or a performer retain the services of a personal physician. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
In your experience, is $5 million a year a usual sum for physicians for 1 year time?
No.
It's not unusual, or it is unusual?
It is quite unusual.
How so? Too high or too low?
Oh, way too high.
$5 million is just a ridiculous amount, right?
In my opinion.
Yeah, it is.
Paul thought the price was ridiculous. It was a lot of money for something like that, and Michael simply couldn't afford it. So he told Murray it wasn't going to work, and that was pretty much how the phone call ended. I mean, I was under the impression that Murray, wait, let me see, make sure I'm quoting this correctly, did not need that shitty-ass job, was doing fine on his own, and no amount of money could make him sell his soul.
Gotcha, bitch!
So now, Paul, Randy Phillips, and Frank DeLeo, who was somehow acting as Michael Jackson's manager at this time, were scrambling to figure out what to do, knowing that $5 million was completely out of the question. And before we dive into the next part of this story, I think it's important that we point something out. Michael Jackson wanted Dr. Murray on the tour, right? Uh-huh. And he told Paul Gongaware, this is the doctor I want, correct? Uh-huh. And Paul Gongaware then called Murray, fully prepared to offer him the job as long as his payment demands were reasonable, correct? Yes! Now what exactly are you getting at? Well, no need to be so rude! What's the first thing that most jobs do before officially hiring someone? A background check. And what did AEG fail to do? A background check. Okay, but Murray had already been Michael Jackson's physician for like 3 years by this point. Was that really necessary? Yes, actually, and here's why. As we discussed earlier, Murray was in serious financial trouble. Everything from liens filed against him to bankruptcies and foreclosures. The man was probably desperate for some financial relief, which would give him all the motive that he needed to do whatever it took to stay in good standing, and not just with Michael, but with AEG as well. That meant making sure MJ showed up to rehearsals and was healthy enough for the London shows, no matter what. As long as Murray did that, he was guaranteed 150,000 G's a month. But if it makes you feel any better, AEG didn't do background checks on anyone. Not Karen Faye, not Travis Payne, not Kenny Ortega. Hell, they didn't even do a background check on Michael Jackson. And yeah, this might seem like a small detail to some, but it's the principle of the thing. A major corporation like AEG should be doing background checks, no matter who it is. It's always important to make sure that you have the right people representing your company and that you're taking the proper precautions. But whatever, let's get back to the main point. Alright, so with Paul trying to figure out what to do about Dr. Murray, he decided to reach out to a friend of his, Dr. Stuart Finkelstein. We mentioned him back in part 1. He was one of the doctors on the Dangerous tour with MJ in 1993. Paul called him to get another opinion on what someone else might charge to be Michael's personal physician, and Dr. Finkelstein spills the tea in his 2013 AEG trial deposition.
Were you ever contacted by anybody to, in regard to another Michael Jackson tour?
Yes.
And when did that happen?
It was probably sometime within a month to 2 months before his death.
And who contacted you?
Paul Gongor.
And what did Mr. Gongor say?
Hey, Stewie, you may have another chance. Michael's doing another tour to London, and he's going to want to take a physician.
And what did you say back?
Great.
Were you interested in going on that tour to London?
Very much so.
And tell me about the rest of that conversation.
I remember asking if he thought Michael was clean.
You asked Mr. Gongor that?
Correct.
Okay. And what did Mr. Gongor say?
He thought yes.
Why did you ask that?
Because if that wasn't the case, I would not have been interested in going on tour.
Because you didn't want a repeat of what happened in Dangerous, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And
I didn't want to be a Dr. Nick.
You asked Mr. Gongor if he thought Michael was clean. Mr. Gongor said he thought he was.
He was clean.
Okay. Tell me what else you remember about the conversations.
Well, I wanted to know why he thought that. He said because he had a physical from an insurance company and that he had passed it. I guess he was in contact with the physician that was currently with Michael, and that physician was telling him that everything was good and Michael was strong and ready to go.
And you know
and he also asked me what I would charge to go on tour.
And what did you tell him you would charge?
40 grand a month. 10 grand a week.
And did Mr. Gongor make it clear to you that he wanted you to go on the tour?
Mr. Gongor is my friend. I would imagine that he would want me to go on the tour.
But he asked you to go on the tour?
He would have wanted me to go on the tour, yes.
Did he ask you to go on the tour?
He was working on getting it so that I could go on the tour.
Obviously, you ended up not becoming part of the This Is It tour. Is that correct?
Correct.
Let's take note of a few things from Dr. Finkelstein's deposition. One of the first things he made sure to ask Paul was whether he thought Michael was clean from the use of any addictive substances. As I mentioned earlier, he was involved in the Dangerous tour when Michael Jackson was struggling with an addiction to Demerol. In fact, he was one of the first people to notice it and try to raise alarms about it.
Well, did you tell Mr. Gongor you thought that Mr. Jackson had a dependency on opiates?
Yes.
And what did Mr. Gongor say to you?
He said, "Don't be a Dr. Nick."
And by Dr. Nick, was he talking about Elvis?
Yes, sir. I was trying to give a heads up to the promoters that we were probably going to have a situation on tour.
And did you give them that heads up?
Yes.
But you told them that you believed that Michael Jackson had a dependency on opiates, correct?
Correct.
And Mr. Gongor was at that meeting, correct?
I would have made that statement to Mr. Gongor, but I don't know if he was at that meeting.
But okay. But at some point you made the statement to him and he made the Dr. Nick comment, correct?
Right.
And you said nobody believed you. Could you elaborate on that?
I was not hired as an addiction medicine specialist. I was hired as a family doctor to treat the crew. And then all of a sudden I come in here and in my first meeting I come up with this statement. And nobody believed me.
Nobody believed Dr. Finkelstein, and Paul Gongor seemingly shrugged it off, telling him not to be a Dr. Nick. The Dr. Nick he's referring to is Dr. George Nicopolis, Elvis Presley's personal physician. Dr. Nick was notorious for overprescribing medications, and I believe he played a role in Elvis's death by prescribing him a mix of addictive substances like amphetamines, barbiturates, and narcotics. Now, Dr. Finkelstein said Paul claimed he thought MJ was clean based on the physical Michael had done in February 2009. 2009 to secure cancellation insurance for the tour. At the time of that exam, I personally believe Michael was clean, but by late April 2009, heading into May, I don't think that was the case anymore. Part of me also thinks Paul didn't fully believe MJ was clean either. You know, since he was aware of Michael's trips to Dr. Arnold Klein's office and had even noticed MJ slurring his speech after returning from one of those visits.
You said that one time you saw Michael Jackson and he looked a little intoxicated. Is that fair?
That's not the word I used, sir.
What word did you use?
I don't recall the word I used, but what I saw was just a little bit of a slower speech pattern, just a slight slur in his speech.
And you also testified that you found out that at that time that Michael Jackson had just come from Dr. Klein's office.
That's correct.
Now, you were certainly on the lookout for any drug use by Michael Jackson, were you?
Yes, I was.
And in fact, you had reservations about handling the production if you observed drug use.
That's right.
What I will say about this is that we don't know exactly when in our timeline Paul Gongaware might have noticed this. It could have been after the phone call with Dr. Finkelstein. However, this does further prove that AEG had a vague idea of what MJ was doing regarding Dr. Klein, and yet they did nothing about it at this point, or really any point. Let's also acknowledge that Dr. Finkelstein was more than willing to be MJ's personal physician for the tour and asked for much more reasonable compensation compared to Dr. Murray, who initially demanded $5 million. During Paul's 2013 AEG trial testimony, he stated that Dr. Finkelstein would have done the tour for nothing because he had such a great time on the Dangerous tour and loved it. And I find that very interesting because Paul and Randy were constantly talking about the tour being over budget. So if they had someone who seemed like a good doctor, genuinely cared about MJ's well-being, and was willing to offer his services for a significantly lower price, how to HE double hockey sticks did we end up with Dr. Murray? The only answer to that question Paul has provided is that it wasn't his place to tell Michael who the doctor would be, and that Michael was so adamant about having Dr. Murray, so they just found a way to hire him. He almost makes it seem like he didn't even mention Dr. Finkelstein as an option to Michael, and I find that pretty baffling as well, because to me, it seems like AEG had no problem, allegedly, controlling other aspects of Michael Jackson's life. Yet the doctor was where they drew the line. Plus, AEG was the one supplying Michael with the advance money, and whatever Dr. Murray was to be paid, it was going to have to be reimbursed by Michael. And like I said in part 2, AEG, they was gonna recoup their little advances, no matter what.
The decision to have a full-time doctor, was that his decision, or was that AEG?
No, it was, this was a debate. Actually, my production guy, Paul Gongaware, who was in charge of the budget, had a big fight with him because we wanted to hire a doctor in London. I mean, and I know I could get in trouble for that. I know there are good doctors in Bangladesh, but the shows weren't in Bangladesh. They were in London. Okay, it made no sense. We spent a lot of money to take Dr. Murray, Conrad Murray, out of his practice. Okay, well, he went public with what the deal. It was $150,000 a month, plus travel, plus hotels, plus per diems. As producers of the show, it made no sense with the doctors and the medical and what you have in London.
But Michael Jackson demanded that doctor.
He demanded.
That wasn't a doctor you selected. That was a doctor he insisted.
Michael said to me, "You don't understand," because I took one last shot at talking him out of. And it has nothing to do with Dr. Murray. No judgments whatsoever. I just said to Michael, I said, "Michael, we're spending too much money. It doesn't make sense." He says, "You don't understand. My body is the machine that fuels this whole business. Okay? I need that kind of attention." And you know what? When Michael Jackson says that to you, and there's this much at stake, you don't argue.
Fine. MJ wanted Dr. Murray, but as of right now, he wants $5 million for the job. So what happened next? According to Paul, per his AEG trial testimony, I was at center staging, got a call from Michael Amir Williams, MJ's personal assistant who also went by the name of Brother Michael. He and Michael Jackson were on their way over to rehearsals. I think Frank DeLeo was even with them. But they were riding in the car over and he said, "We're going to need to get a deal done with Dr. Murray." Right after that, I heard Michael, who was in the car, saying offer him $150, offer him $150. And I knew what that meant. Offer him $150,000 a month. After that, Paul called Dr. Murray. He recalls the conversation going like this. I called him and said, "Dr. Murray, I'm authorized to offer you $150,000 a month." And he said, "No, I don't think I could do it for that." And I kind of cut him off at that point and said, "That offer comes directly from the artist." And right away, he said, "I'll take it." Now let's hear this from Dr. Murray's point of view, according to his god-awful book. Late that afternoon, producer Paul Gongaware called me at my Las Vegas clinic. I have have a deal. 150. 150 of what? How did you derive that offer? We had a meeting and decided it was a fair offer. Was Michael Jackson involved in that meeting, I asked? Yes, this came straight from the top. Straight from the top means it came from Michael Jackson. Yes, so you're saying that Michael Jackson offered me $150,000 a month. If you or AEG were asking me to close down my practices and travel abroad for an extended amount of time, I would say no, it is not worth it. A practice is not built in a day. I've taken my life to build my practices, and you are asking me to close them down. Personally, I feel like his whole reasoning for accepting the money only if it came from Michael Jackson was just another way for him to push the narrative that he was doing this purely out of love and friendship, and that he cared about Michael Jackson. He was his friend. Because remember, folks, he didn't need this shitty-ass job. He was doing fine on his own.
Sure, Jan.
Nonetheless, Dr. Murray got the job.
Boo, tomato, 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 I'm throwing tomatoes.
And on May 6th, 2009, Paul Gongaware would send an email to Michael Amir Williams to confirm it was all set. Done at $150K per month per MJ. He needs about 10 days to wind down his practice, then he will be full-time. All that was left to do was draft the contract, and that was a task within itself. Now let's talk a little bit about Dr. Murray's contract with AEG. First and foremost, I'm not a lawyer, and I don't know much about legal jargon, so we're just gonna do the best we can. And if you're planning to come for me in the comments, I didn't send for you, Bookie. Thank you. Okay, so now that Paul had done his part, he delegated the task of getting Murray's contract drafted and negotiated to a man named Tim Woolley, an accountant/financial consultant who worked for AEG Live, along with Kathy Jory, an independent attorney. It's important to note that this contract went through several drafts, and AEG was giving Murray the runaround. In fact, Tim Woolley sent the following email to a tour manager named Bridget Siegel on May 26, 2009. Bridget, any joy with an agreement for Murray to sign? He's pinging us for payment, but we can't without a contract in place. Would like to stall him with something for him to look at and mull over. A final version of the contract wouldn't be ready until around the middle of June, and it wouldn't be signed by Murray until June 24th, just 24 hours before Michael Jackson died. Alright, now let's break this contract down for the girls in the balcony. Starting at the very top, this independent contractor agreement was made effective as of May 1st, 2009, and Dr. Murray accepted the terms of the contract orally on May 8th. He would be performing his services for Michael in good faith until the contract could be fully drafted and signed. Obviously, Dr. Murray had already been performing services for Michael before this point, but this marked his official start date as Michael's doctor when hired by AEG. Even though Murray didn't sign the agreement until June 24th, he was to receive back payment for the month of May once the contract was executed. Some key terms we need to recognize are producer, artist, and GCA. Whenever you see the term producer, it refers to AEG Live. GCA refers to Dr. Conrad Murray's LLC. And whenever we're talking about Dr. Murray himself specifically and not his LLC, he's referred to as Dr. Murray in the agreement. Either way, it's all him. Artist refers to Michael Jackson. For a contract that was for his doctor, who was supposed to be servicing him, it's surprising how little Michael is actually mentioned in this contract. The agreement was supposed to cover the first and second legs of the tour, from July 13th, 2009 to March 6, 2010, which would also include the tour's break, meaning Murray would still be paid during that time. Right beside those dates, it says Artist Agreement in parentheses, which refers to the show dates Michael agreed to. However, the dates in Michael's contract were different from those listed here. His dates were listed as July 26th through September 30th, 2009, only the first leg. With Michael's contract, I believe there was eventually going to be an updated version to reflect changes in the tour dates and his management, since he signed his agreement back in January 2009, and a lot had transpired since then. Now, let's get into the nitty-gritty. Per this agreement, Murray's job was to provide general care to the artist and administer it professionally and with the greatest degree of care. Alright, come on guys, let me finish. Let me finish. That general care included tending to the artist's general medical needs, assisting and treating the artist in case of medical emergencies, and providing such other services as were reasonably requested by the artist from time to time. So basically, AEG just wanted Dr. Murray to take care of Michael and do whatever he felt was necessary. That doesn't seem so bad, right? Well, it does when you realize what kind of medical care Murray was actually providing for Michael Jackson.
Everybody talks about the propofol, right? But they forget all the other stuff because the propofol is what killed him.
So let's talk about the other stuff. Murray wasn't just administering propofol to Michael every night for the better part of 2 months. He was also, allegedly, providing him with stimulants, a class of drugs that increased alertness. I briefly mentioned this during our conversation about nurse Cherilyn Lee. During a police search in Michael Jackson's bedroom after his passing, the authorities found a bottle containing ephedrine, caffeine, and aspirin combined, also known as an ECA stack. The pills contained 25 milligrams of ephedrine, 200 milligrams of caffeine, and 80 milligrams of aspirin. This combination of drugs is typically used to boost exercise performance and aid in weight loss, so Michael was taking them to have energy to get through his rehearsals. On top of this, MJ was known to drink energy drinks like Red Bull or various canned Starbucks coffee drinks, which could add another 100 to 200 milligrams of caffeine. This stack of drugs can also cause a slew of other side effects such as insomnia, mood changes, restlessness, and tremors, coupled with the fact that they suppress appetite, which can lead to weight loss. And Michael was losing weight when he really needed to be gaining it.
But what they found in his system was that he was being dosed with uppers, right? So they were giving him ephedrine and they were giving him caffeine and stuff like that. So that's an upper. That's so that he can get on stage and perform. But of course, once you've had all this caffeine and ephedrine injected into your system, it comes to midnight and you can't get to sleep because you've got these uppers in your system, and so then they give him the downers.
So when Michael Jackson would get home from rehearsals, he was unable to sleep, and that's when, as Miss Katherine Jackson stated in her suit against AEG, the cocktail would be administered. This cocktail consisted of diazepam, lorazepam, midazolam, and propofol, all of which were found in his system when he passed. Besides the propofol, these are all benzodiazepines, a class of drugs meant to help you fall asleep and relax. Murray also kept flumazenil on hand, a drug used as an antidote to reverse the sedative effects of benzodiazepines. So for the better part of these 2 months, from the end of April into June, Michael Jackson's body was placed in a state of dependence on these medications just to function, coupled with the fact that he wasn't getting real sleep, eating very little, and still expected to rehearse at full capacity. His health was severely deteriorating. Under Dr. Conrad Murray's care, MJ started to noticeably decline, and everyone around him saw it. But we'll get more into that in part 3. Let's put this into perspective a little bit. On April 28th, Murray purchased a shipment of propofol, and on April 30th, he bought lorazepam and midazolam. According to Miss Jackson's suit, in early May 2009, AEG complained to Michael Jackson that he was missing rehearsals, citing a negative health condition related to prescription medications. AEG instructed Michael Jackson to stop seeing and taking medications from his current doctor, and instead start seeing a doctor that AEG would provide. On May 8th, AEG hired Dr. Murray, and by May 10th, MJ's voice sounded like what we heard in that infamous cell phone recording. Instead of ceasing his treatments, Murray went ahead and purchased more propofol on May 12th. Now, during the 2011 Conrad Murray trial, a voice recording was revealed from Dr. Murray's phone, capturing Michael Jackson in a very vulnerable state. His speech was slow, slurred, and he sounded completely out of it. For the purposes of this series, I'm going to include a portion of that audio in here. It's heartbreaking, haunting, and should never have been released, let alone recorded by his so-called trusted physician. I want people to understand what this man did to Michael Jackson. This is the person that AEG deemed competent enough to provide care for Michael Jackson. Someone who would administer so many medications to the point where Michael sounded like that. Viewer discretion is advised. I'll be putting chapter markers in this video, so please use them to skip over this part if you do not want to hear it.
I'm gonna do everything. And that will be remembered more than my performances. My performances will be up there, helping my children. It's always been my dream. I love them. And I love them because I didn't have a childhood. I had no childhood. I feel their pain. I feel their hurt. I can deal with it. You're the world. We are the world. Will you be there? The lost children. These are the songs I've written because it hurt, you know? It hurt.
Let's all just take a moment, Full transparency. I never want anyone to think it's easy for me to make this series and talk about these things. I'm a fan, just like most of you, and it truly breaks my heart that this is how he had to spend, unbeknownst to him, the final months of his life. This was supposed to be a happy time for him. He was going to share his music and art with a whole new generation of fans, including his 3 children. It was like his redemption arc after everything he went through during the 2005 trial. I hate that we never got to see it in its rightful form, and I hate that a man who was 100% savable is gone. Let's move on to the next portion of Murray's contract, compensation and other benefits. If Murray was going to shut down his medical practices, move to London, and continue down the track of speed running losing his medical license, he wanted to be compensated accordingly. I'm going to go through all the things AEG was going to provide for Murray and then focus on a few key details. Per this agreement, Murray was to receive $150,000 a month, first-class airfare, housing in London for himself and his family, medical equipment like a CPR machine, needles, catheters, and any other mutually approved medical equipment necessary for his services. AEG would also provide him with an approved fee to hire a qualified assistant medical person. They would also cover his and his family's travel, accident, and sickness insurance. How thoughtful. First, let's take a look at Section 3.3. It reads, "Producers shall provide Dr. Murray for his use during the term, which per this agreement commenced on May 1st, 2009, with medical equipment requested by Dr. Murray to assist him in performing the services as approved by producer. The equipment will include a portable cardiopulmonary resuscitation unit, CPR machine, saline, catheters, needles, a gurney, and other mutually approved medical equipment necessary for the services." So AEG was supposed to provide equipment for Murray. To do that, they would have needed receipts, purchase orders, something to reimburse him, right? Otherwise, he'd have to keep paying out of pocket, like he already had been doing. And we all know he couldn't afford that. Which raises a big question. If AEG was handling expenses, they had to have known, allegedly, what Murray was purchasing. That includes propofol. They were already aware of Michael's frequent visits to Dr. Arnold Klein's office. Emails and billing statements proved that. And yet, they turned a blind eye. Now, in Joe Jackson's 2010 lawsuit against Murray, an expense sheet outlined what AEG was supposed to cover. On top of Murray's $150,000 monthly salary, AEG was set to pay an additional $39,045 per month for expenses. However, AEG made it clear that Murray's paycheck was coming out of MJ's share of the tour profits, meaning Michael was essentially funding his own doctor. So, was Michael also supposed to cover the cost of the medical equipment? And if Murray was allegedly there to provide general medical care, why did he need a CPR machine for a man who was said to be perfectly healthy? Now let's answer that. Murray needed the CPR machine because he was giving Michael Jackson propofol almost nightly, alongside other sedatives that carried a serious risk of respiratory failure and cardiac arrest. He knew the risks, so he wanted the machine as a precaution to cover his own ass. But the gag is, Murray was a cardiologist, a whole specialist in interventional cardiology, but on the day Michael Jackson died, he couldn't even perform adequate chest compressions and mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. So would he even know how to use a CPR machine if he had gotten one? Like, I'm so dead ass. Murray claimed he wanted it for MJ's health, safety, and well-being during rehearsals and performances.
Okay.
I mean, he wanted one available for hotel use as well as venue use at the O2, and despite the multiple drafts of his contract, Murray made sure that the CPR machine was explicitly stated in the very first one, and that's tea. So if that was such a clear requirement from the jump, why wasn't the CPR machine provided when the contract was executed on May 1st?
When was that provision added?
That provision was in my very first draft.
So right from the very beginning, Dr. Murray was asking for that.
He identified it as equipment that he would request.
Did he also refer to it as a crash cart?
Not to me.
Was it your understanding was not going to be provided for Dr. Murray until AEG had signed the agreement?
It was my understanding it wouldn't be provided till we got to London because that's when he asked it to be provided. And presumably the contract would have been signed by then.
Wasn't this equipment supposed to be provided during the term of the contract?
No, But the term wouldn't commence until the contract was signed, and he told me he needed the equipment in London.
Basically, Kathy Jory claimed the CPR machine wasn't provided because Murray specifically requested it to be available once they arrived in London. She also stated that the contract wouldn't officially commence until it was signed. But if that's the case, why does the term start on May 1st, 2009 if Murray wasn't going to be provided with the equipment he needed until later? Especially when there was an alleged oral agreement and Murray was supposedly working in good faith, as he stated in this May 28, 2009 email to Tim Woolley. Dear Tim, I gathered from your last email that my contract is taking a bit more time to develop than usual. In the meantime, I have performed and continue to fulfill my services to the client in good faith. Therefore, I am asking you to deposit my fee for May in reciprocity of good faith on your part as per our agreement. The usual and customary date for deposit is around the 15th of each month. By today's date, we are 13 days beyond receipt of my monthly fee. I would appreciate it if you look into this matter immediately so we can go forward amicably, as we have done to this point. As per usual, I find it a pleasure to work with you and I look forward to our future endeavors. Sincerely, Conrad. Plus, if we look at section 1 under scope of services, the last sentence says, Dr. Murray shall perform such services in London, England during any time periods in which the artist is located in London, and at all other times during the term, the services will be performed in the United States. So once again, the term officially started on May 1st, 2009. AEG, aka the producer, was supposed to provide Murray with compensation and other benefits during the term per section 3. Meanwhile, Murray was expected to perform services for MJ not just in London, but also in the United States. If the term wasn't to commence until the contract was signed, then why was AEG dragging their feet? I'm gonna go out on a limb and say it's because they did not want to pay for Dr. Murray or his funky ass services. Especially since Randy Phillips and Paul Gongaware supposedly fought so hard begging MJ to choose a London-based physician. That, coupled with the fact that Murray was easy to manipulate and stall because he was financially strapped. You know what? Let me bring up the next thing we need to address, because at this point I'm gonna start talking my little sugar honey iced tea real soon. Let's go to section 3.4. It reads, producer shall pay a mutually approved fee for a qualified assistant medical person. The assistant will provide assistance in connection with the services required of Dr. Murray under this agreement. First things first, let's talk about the fact that the qualified assistant medical person was supposed to be selected by Dr. Murray and approved by AEG. But what about the artist? You know, the he man. Michael Jackson, you're telling me that the actual patient had zero say in who would be assisting with his medical care? He couldn't select nor approve the person who would be handling his health?
That's suspicious. That's weird.
Okay, so why did Dr. Murray even need a qualified medical person in the first place? Simple. He was overwhelmed. To again quote his monstrosity of a book, ever since I came to Los Angeles a few months ago to take care of Michael, things changed. I came here thinking I'll be with Michael and the 3 children during the day, but at nights I'll go home to rest and be with my family. Instead, the opposite happened. Michael did not only want me to be with him during the day, but he also wanted me to be with him every night. Just as Michael complained to me that he was being overworked by AEG like a machine, I was feeling the same. I reiterated I did not come to Los Angeles for this. I've been duped into a position which I am purely vulnerable at this time, and I don't like it. I did not give up my practices for this. Dr. Conrad Murray's ability to shapeshift every situation to make himself the victim should be studied. Absolutely no one forced him to care for Michael Jackson or stay in the position he was in. Considering the fact that there was not even a signed contract, he could have quit at any moment. The only thing tethering him to Michael Jackson and AEG was the possibility of 150,000 G's hitting his bank account at some point. Nonetheless, aside from Murray's overwhelmed and exhausted state, I do believe that having another person on hand would have been beneficial in case something went wrong. Whenever Michael Jackson explained his desire for propofol, he always gave the same spiel, that an anesthesiologist had administered it to him before, and that it was 100% safe as long as someone was there to monitor him.
But that's the question. Michael has always had an anesthesiologist around him when he was taking things.
I don't do IV sedation. That's where you need an anesthesiologist to do that. And he said, "Oh, it's safe, man. I used it for all those years between shows, and I got put to sleep." I said, "I can't imagine that was good sleep." He said, "No, it works really well."
And the 2 times that he received propofol in Ireland, an anesthesiologist was always present, and that was his request.
He said, "Find me an anesthesiologist. I don't care how much money they want. Find me an anesthesiologist to be with me here overnight and give me this IV."
Oh, I get it. So what you're saying is that qualified assistant medical person that Murray wanted was actually an anesthesiologist. Yes, but who? Let's talk about Dr. David Adams, a Las Vegas anesthesiologist who administered propofol to Michael Jackson during a few dental procedures in 2008.
The reason I mentioned Las Vegas, I wanted to give you another name of Dr. Adams, because he asked about the milk.
Oh, that's right. He mentioned that Michael mentioned that Dr. Adams, that actually was in Vegas, right?
Yeah. David Adams.
And yes, this is the same Dr. David Adams whose medical license was suspended in 2018. Not for anything related to Michael, but for something else entirely. According to the Nevada State Medical Board of Osteopathic Medicine, he was caught giving pre-signed prescription blanks to another doctor to use and was charged with 8 felonies, 4 counts of conspiracy to violate the Controlled Substances Act, and 4 counts of possession of signed prescription blanks. Eventually, his suspension was lifted, he paid a fine, and he was placed on probation for a few years. As of 2025, his medical license in Nevada remains active. That recording of Dr. Murray heard during the court trial is from his police interview on June 27, 2009, just 2 days after MJ's death. In typical fashion, Murray was engaging in some classic blame shifting, doing everything he could to deflect responsibility for Michael Jackson's death on anyone but himself. But Hannah, what does Dr. Adams have to do with any of this? According to Dr. Adams' 2013 Jackson vs. AEG trial testimony, he administered propofol to Michael Jackson 4 times. He met MJ through a cosmetic dentist named Dr. Mark Tadrissi, who had a VIP patient needing a few procedures and wanted to know if Dr. Adams was interested in handling the anesthesia. The first encounter took place in May 2008.
When Michael Jackson had his dental surgeries in 2008, those are documented. We have the medical records. There were 4 times in 2008, and those were for properly documented medical procedures. And by the way, just so you know, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, those were also at the JANCO certified medical facilities. So my client doesn't run around giving people propofol in their homes. No, he does them in medical settings and for appropriate procedures.
Clock him. So basically, Adams wasn't on that sugar honey iced tea that Dr. Murray was on. Insomnia and MJ's sleeping habits were never discussed during these procedures. He was never given any narcotics, and Michael seemed happy with how each procedure went. One interesting detail from Dr. Adams' testimony is that he recalled Michael having an abnormally large tongue. And the reason that this mattered was because a larger tongue can obstruct the airway, causing labored breathing and even like a snoring sound, which he said happened during one of his procedures. And to alleviate that and keep the airway open, the tongue just needs to be moved off of the pharynx, the throat. And I guess that's just chilling, given the circumstances of MJ's death. Let's fast forward to late March/early April 2009, where Dr. Adams had his first encounter with Dr. Murray.
My client has only met Dr. Murray once. And he met Dr. Murray the first week of April 2009. When Murray called him, asking him to come to his house for a meeting with Michael Jackson and himself. My client said, "No, I don't know who you are. I'm not going to meet you at your house." So they agreed to meet at Dr. Murray's office, okay? Now, at that office meeting, Mr. Jackson asked my client to join in the tour in Europe.
Let's put this thing down, flip it, and reverse it. In Adams' AEG trial testimony, he stated that this meeting took place on a Sunday in March 2009, as he was getting ready to go to church when Murray called. Now, I'm more inclined to believe that this took place on Sunday, April 5th, 2009, because Michael was in Las Vegas that Saturday on April 4th, seeing a La Rev show at the Wynn Resort with Kenny Ortega. So, anyway, Adams met Murray at his office and waited for him and Michael to pull up. He recalled that Murray was driving and Michael was in the back seat, per Dr. Adams. Well, Michael and Dr. Murray got out of the car. I got out of the car. We introduced ourselves to each other, and I told Michael how ridiculous he looked because he had a scarf and and he was all dressed in black, and it was about 1,000 degrees outside, and we sort of joked. And then we went inside. We went into Murray's office. I believe Michael started talking about this tour. Michael explained why he was doing the tour. He says, the only reason I'm doing this tour is because I want to prove to my kids that I'm the best entertainer in the world, and I'm not doing it for any other reason. Murray excused himself and left the office. And then me and Michael talked, and it was sort of like I was on an interview, and he was telling me a little bit about him and how he felt and his family and different entertainers and this, and we sat there and we talked for about an hour and a half. He wanted to know a lot about me. He wanted to know, did I have kids? Was I married? This, that, and the other. And I still wanted to know why. Like, okay, you're not holding your chest, you don't have chest pains, like, what's going on? Before I get back to Adams's recollection, let's talk about Murray's side of the story for a second. Murray claimed that MJ called him up, said he was having trouble sleeping, and asked about Diprovan, aka propofol. According to Murray, he told MJ that Diprovan wasn't a drug you could just call up and get. It had to be ordered, and he wasn't sure how to get it to him, especially since it was a weekend. MJ then supposedly brought up Dr. Adams, saying that he had given him the drug before in Las Vegas several times, and that he would take him to a plastic surgeon's office to administer it there. Murray said he got Dr. Adams' contact information and called to see if he was available to help.
I called Mr. Jackson. So I spoke to Mr. Adams, Dr. Adams. He told me that he may have enough of the product that you want. He's quite familiar with him because when Dr. Adams said to me, oh yeah, I know Michael very well. He does well on Diprovan. He loves that drug. Milk. He didn't call it milk. He just said he loves that drug. Milk was adopted later on when I started to work with him. I guess he started to call it milk. So Mr. Adams could not get the cosmetologist to open his practice. So I allowed him on the Sunday to use my office where I had oxygen, crash cart, monitoring devices, like the oximeter, to use my office to treat Mr. Jackson. After Mr. Jackson got here, Dr. Adams was waiting. I brought him upstairs, I introduced myself, and I left them. I said, how long are you going to let him sleep? He told me he was going to do 5 or 6 hours. This was about 1 o'clock in the day. So I said, okay, so I'll come back around 7. And he said, yes, 7 would be good. And I came back at 7 o'clock.
Now someone is lying here, and I'm willing to bet it's you, Conway. I mean Conrad. Adams stated that he had never met Murray before, which is why they arranged to meet at his office, and there was no mention of any medications over the phone. So how would Dr. Adams have ever known to bring Diprovan or ensure he was in an environment where he could properly administer it? Not to mention, Diprovan never came up during the meeting the three of them had, which according to Adams only lasted about 2.5 to 3 hours, and that is what we're about to get into. Dr. Murray comes back and we're sitting in the office. He pulled him to the back and they stayed back there for about 15 minutes, and I'm getting restless because I don't know what's going on. So I walk to the back and they're having a conversation, and I say, hey, you know, I've got things to do. I've got to go. And they said, hold on a second, just hold on. So I said, okay. And I go back to the office. Michael and Murray walk back in, and Murray really looked like he had just lost his best friend. And he sits there in the chair, and Michael sits there. And then that's when Michael says to me, I would like for you to go on tour. And I say, on tour? Okay, and do what, you know? I said, I don't sing, I really can't dance, so to do what? And he says, these are his exact words. I remember it like it was yesterday. He says, I would like for you to help me get my rest. And I referred to Dr. Murray and I said, what do you mean get your rest? And he says, well, you know, I'm entertaining, I'm jumping around, I'm doing this, and every once in a while I need an IV. And he says, I just need you to help me get my rest. And they were pretty vague. In hindsight, I know what they were talking about, but then I said, help you get your rest? What do you mean? And I told him that Dr. Murray could do that. You know, he's a cardiologist and I'm just an anesthesiologist, you know? And then they just started asking me about my practice. Well, how much money did I make? You know, if you were to shut down for a year, how much money would you need? And I just didn't know what to say, you know? I just said, I'll get back. I don't know, you know? I'm here thinking this guy's having a heart attack and they're asking me about going on tour, and you know, I couldn't even begin to fathom what they were talking about. Alright, so after Michael asked him about going on tour, Adam stayed for about another 15 minutes before leaving. Michael had apparently told him not to give him an answer right then, but to go home and think about it. One thing I want to pause on for a moment, Adam said that when Murray returned, he looked upset, like he had just lost his best friend. But why was that? We could speculate that maybe the conversation between MJ and Murray had been tense, but if that were the case, wouldn't Michael have also looked upset? Or was it because Murray was feeling a bit envious, worried that another doctor might swoop in and potentially actually take his position? I guess we'll never really know the answer to that. Either way, it's a very interesting detail. A few days to a week later, Murray and Adams exchanged some text messages and phone calls.
My client gave him a list of his requirements, from licensing to the possible association of a sleep specialist, and told him what he wanted. Now, a few days after that meeting, Dr. Murray called my client back and said, well, look, we think that, what you're asking is too much, but we're going to take care of it, but tell us how much money you want. Now, my client said, look, if you guys want me to be gone a year, that means I have to close my practice down. Well, this is how much I need. The total is going to be about $1.3 million. Now, Morris says, I can get somebody to do it for $600,000.
Who, Conroy? You asked for $5 million initially, didn't you? And $1.3 million annually is still less than what Murray asked for. So once again, who? Quickly, answer me, Consuelo!
Now, my client says, look, you can get somebody to do it for $200,000, but you're going to be giving Michael Jackson a $200,000 funeral. Now, Murray never called my client
So
back.
are you saying basically that your client, Dr. Adams, turned down an offer from Dr. Conrad Murray to accompany him to Europe for Michael Jackson's tour because he thought what Dr. Conrad Murray was doing was too dangerous? That's a yes or no question.
Exactly, because basically he was saying, look, for $600,000, he could do whatever it is, okay, and hire whatever other doctors that, he needed to hire to do the work.
All right. Last question, Lebo. Did Dr. Adams tell Dr. Murray, oh, he loves that drug. He does so well under that drug, Diprovan, which is also known as propofol?
Absolutely not. And just so you know, Jane, we have information that as far back as 2007, Dr. Murray was pressuring some local doctors to actually give Michael Jackson propofol. So first of all, he hasn't even come clear regarding when he started pushing propofol on Michael Jackson. Okay? Now, the other point I wanted to make, what happened, okay, to Michael Jackson was as a result of Dr. Murray's greed. Not only did he not hire another specialist, he decided to hire himself. And he didn't know what he was doing. And let me tell you something. If Michael Jackson had hired who he wanted to hire, he would still be alive today. Dr. Murray overruled Michael Jackson and hired himself. Because if my client had been hired, Dr. Murray would not have been getting $150,000 a month because there would be no need for him.
That wasn't loud enough.
Absolutely no notes. My scalp is as bald as Murray's after that eulogy Dr. Adams' lawyer just gave. He said Dr. Murray hired himself, didn't know what he was doing, overruled Michael Jackson, and that if MJ had hired the doctor that he wanted, he would still be alive today. Can we get another round of applause? Yeah, let it simmer a little bit. Bathe in the moonlight. Now, there are quite a few small plot holes, if you will, in Dr. Murray's contract, but these are the main two things that I wanted to focus on. The life-saving equipment AEG never provided for Dr. Murray, and the medical assistant that was never hired. Let's also acknowledge that this contract was signed solely by Dr. Murray and was never signed by AEG or Michael Jackson. For this agreement to have been legally binding and for Murray to receive his payment, it needed to be signed by the both of them. To my knowledge, Dr. Murray was never paid for his services and has not received a cent from AEG. And you know what? Hell yeah. With the role of the doctor now secured, she said begrudgingly, let's move on to our contenders for Michael Jackson's personal chef, Chef Kai Chase and Chef Douglas B. Jones. One of the main points of contention people have about Michael Jackson during the preparations for This Is It is how noticeably thin he appeared. As we've discussed, MJ was being administered a cocktail of medications that affected his appetite and took a toll on his overall well-being. As the pressure of the concerts continued to build and Dr. Murray's control over his care intensified, his weight only declined further. But despite all of that, let's shift the focus to the people who were actually responsible for supplying Michael and his children with the nutrients they needed, Chef Kai Chase and Chef Douglas B. Jones. Let's start with Kai Chase.
This was a lovely man. This man was sensational. It was a love to everyone. Everyone appreciated the man's, generosity and his, he's just a fabulous man, fabulous father to his children.
Kai Chase specializes in prepping new American and French master cuisine. She has also worked with a number of notable figures, including Barack Obama, Kevin Hart, Steve Harvey, Bernie Mac, Cedric the Entertainer, Chris Tucker. It's no wonder Michael Jackson was so impressed with her. If it's one thing my good sis Kai gonna do, it's chase the bag. Am I right?
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Kai began working for MJ toward the end of March 2009. She worked for him for a total of 2 months with a gap in between. She was let go in May and brought back in early June. But we'll get more into that a little later, darling.
You first joined the family in March of this year. You got a phone call that there was a client who needed somebody who could prepare healthy meals. You get the job and then you find out it's Michael Jackson.
Right. I couldn't believe it.
Basically, Kai Chase got a call one day from culinary staffing saying that a client was looking for a professional chef. She sent over her resume, and within the hour, she got a call back. The client was very impressed and wanted to meet with her. A meeting was set up, and it turned out to be with Michael Jackson's personal assistant, Michael Amir Williams. He asked her a series of questions, including ones about nutrition and work scheduling. At first, she thought he was the client. To quote her 2013 AEG trial testimony, "I thought he was my client, so I asked him, I said, 'So you're the client?' And he said, 'No, I'm not, but this is who you will be working for.' And he gave me a card, a business card, and it said the Michael Jackson Company on it. And when he handed me the card, I was like, whoa, you know? I was like, wow, this is a really big honor, honestly. And he said the client was very impressed with your resume, having come from working for these people. And this is how I, in turn, got the job to work for him."
Are you kidding? You're kidding, no way. Am I being punked? Am I on candid camera? You know, something like that. No, this is true. He wants you to come work for him.
She'd be invited to Michael Jackson's home for a second interview, this time not with MJ himself, but with his 3 children, Prince, Paris, and BG.
So you go to Michael Jackson's home, the home he is renting, and the person who interviews you there, or the people that interview you there first, it's not Michael Jackson.
No.
It's his children.
It's the children.
Per Kai's AEG trial testimony. Well, they were talking over one another. They were very excited. They had anticipated me coming, and we spoke about everything from food to video games and everything in between, you know? But they wanted to make sure that I knew how to prepare healthy meals because that was what they and their father eat. And that's the way they eat. We eat healthy. We don't eat pork. We don't eat beef. Can you fix vegetarian? Daddy likes apricots. We like fruit. Blanket likes mangoes. And they were very much into making sure that I knew what was required for their healthy living. It was really interesting because it felt like immediately a bond was developing. It just felt like this is a place where I need to be. And it was beautiful. A beautiful beginning. In the beginning, Kai Chase stated she was working for MJ 7 days a week, arriving at 8 a.m. and not leaving until somewhere between 6 and 8:30 p.m. She prepared breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snacks for him and the kids, cleaned up, kept the pantry stocked, and did the grocery shopping. She and Michael interacted almost daily, as he was very much hands-on in his children's lives, especially in their nutrition. So he'd always come down into the kitchen in the mornings, in the afternoons. We'd hold conversations about healthy eating, juicing, that kind of thing, and just life, people, places. He wanted to get to know the woman who was in the house feeding him and his family. In April 2009, she described the house as very warm. There was a good feeling, a good energy of love in the home. There was always music playing, Disney, classical, the Rolling Stones, David Bowie, per her AEG trial testimony. She stated MJ was very upbeat. He was very excited about what was to happen, about the tour, about having his children see him perform this greatest comeback tour. He'd always come down into the kitchen sometimes to speak to me and, you know, talk to me about it. A whole conversation. He would be dressed sharp. He would have black Levi's on and a tweed blazer, glasses on, Tom Ford cologne, just energized and the Michael Jackson that I know him to be. She also repeatedly praised how hands-on Michael was with the children, always making sure they were learning and studying. He took great pride in helping them explore things like foreign languages, film, art, and nature. She recalled that sometimes they would eat meals inspired by different parts of the world, like East Indian food, and then discuss which region of India the cuisine came from. Let's talk a little bit about the kinds of foods Kai prepared for MJ. She stated that because Michael was getting ready for the tour and wanted to stay strong and eat healthy, she did a lot of juicing for him using organic fruits and vegetables. She also prepared lean proteins like chicken, fish, and turkey for him and the children, along with lots of vegetables.
Yeah, when you do things like this and you're expending obviously the kind of energy he would expend, and I would see on that rehearsal video, what else would he exist on? I mean, these are great, I'm sure, for a quick burst of energy and to kind of maintain you. But when you're working that hard, what kind of foods and what kind of calorie intake do you have to have?
As far as with the juices as well, lean proteins. Lean proteins, organic, vegetables and things of that nature. He loved fish, monkfish on a bed of arugula. Those were very good for him. As a dancer, he wanted to eat very healthy so he wouldn't, cramping. Dancers have to eat, like any activity, like sports activities.
You've got an example of the juices. Let's take a look at this salad back here.
Oh, good, okay.
And what is this? Because it looks very intriguing. A lot of great color.
Now, this is one of the salads that he enjoyed the most. Mr. Jackson enjoyed the most that I did. And this is a seared ahi tuna salad with herbs de Provence on top. And the dry herbs, and seared them very quickly in a hot pan, and put them on top of the salad. So, in actuality, these are some of the things that he that he loved to eat.
And that was, in a sense, it's kind of a little bit of a niçoise. Sort of,
it is.
You've got green beans, you've got tomato, you've got olives, you've got potato, and you've got eggs. So there's a decent amount of protein.
Girl, that salad look good as hell. Aside from the healthier meals Monday through Friday, Kai also implemented comfort food Saturdays where they'd enjoy meals that weren't so strict, just to break up the monotony of always eating clean and to make sure the kids didn't develop unhealthy relationships with food. She said they'd always have things like gumbo, fried chicken, KFC, barbecue chicken, and corn on the cob.
That's a black king right there. That's a black king right there. Give me that. Give me that.
One thing I'd like to bring up is that I've seen a lot of discourse about MJ's eating habits because, once again, he appeared rather thin as preparations for the concerts progressed. But I'd like to point out that anything Chef Chase prepared for MJ, at least in terms of what he liked to eat to get concert ready, was at his request. It seems like he chose to follow a healthier diet focused on complex carbs, lean proteins, and healthy fats, all of which provide sustained energy and support muscle repair. As a dancer, MJ needed that. I believe he always preferred that more toned, lean physique, similar to the build of many of his dance inspirations like Fred Astaire, Gene Kelly, and Bob Fosse. Maintaining that body type was comfortable for him and enhanced his movements on stage. Made him glide. Now, with our discussion currently focusing on April 2009, it's important to note that MJ was still relatively healthy and lean. He didn't really start to lose weight until May, when his care under Dr. Murray intensified and when Kai Chase was briefly let go. To Kai, things were going very well between her, MJ, and the children. MJ's eldest son, Prince, had even mentioned to her that MJ wanted her to come to London with them, which she graciously accepted. But the first week of May 2009, she was laid off. Per her AEG trial testimony. I was let go by Mr. Michael Amir. At the time, they were preparing, I believe, for an early departure to go over to London, and they were trying to make sure of the different employees that were going to be accompanying Mr. Jackson. So AEG Live knew who the ones were and mentioned to Mr. Amir, he asked me, what's your situation with pay to go overseas? So he had discussed a pay rate with me, and he said, okay, let me get that approved. He comes back, and he lets me know that there's been a change in management, and you, therefore, are not going. I begged and pleaded with him, even said to him, my rate is negotiable at this point. I've been getting Mr. Jackson, feeding him healthy and his children healthy, getting him ready for this tour, so my rate is negotiable. You have to work with me. That wasn't the case. He said to me, sorry, we're letting you go. There's a change in management. There's nothing I can do about it. She continues, I was told this on 2 occasions. First, I was told in person, let me see what I can do if it's negotiable. Then, the next day, I was coming into work. I was getting in the car to drive to the home and I got a phone call from Mr. Amir saying, there's no need for you to come in. We're not going to use you. You're fired. And I asked him why. And once again, there's a change in management. We're going to get someone else. She didn't even get to say goodbye to Michael or his children. Now, before we move on to who took over for Kai Chase, let's clock a little bit of tea. Kai's sudden firing is very sus, as the kids on the Clock app say. But honestly, it's very on brand for the This Is It narrative as a whole. It's like if you were actually looking out for Michael, exhibiting a crumb of concern or care, you were suddenly a problem and had to be silenced or cut off. Allegedly. In May 2009, Dr. Murray started popping up more, and behind the scenes, power shifts were beginning to happen between Dr. Tomei Tomei, AEG, and Frank DeLeo, who became MJ's manager after MJ told Tomei to get to steppin'. People have speculated that Kai wasn't just let go for no reason. It might have been a way to limit the number of people in the house who could observe MJ's declining condition, or his increasingly private treatments with Murray. We'll discuss this more in part 3, but the closer it got to showtime, the closer and tighter MJ's circle became. With Kai temporarily out of the picture, who was going to be MJ's chef? Let's give it up for Chef Douglas B. Jones. Wait, Is this the guy who told us as MJ fans we should forgive Dr. Murray? Yeah, suck it, thou boo this man. Can I get some boos? Yeah, that's right, that's right.
Initially, when I got the call from my agent headhunter, it was specifically mentioned to me that they wanted an African-American chef. Once I arrived at the property, I was instructed to drive around for about 5 minutes and then return. Once I got in, he apologized to me, and he mentioned that Mr. Joe Jackson had showed up at the property, and he wasn't allowed to enter the property, and he was very upset about it. To that degree, they said, you know, he either shook the gate or hit the gate, and I think when he left, he was frustrated about something. You know, they didn't tell me what the situation was.
Okay, first, what's up with the Jacksons and trying to shake down Michael's gate? Because according to Bill and Javon, didn't Randy Jackson do the same thing in 2007 and made my man miss Elizabeth Taylor's birthday party? Anyway, Chef Douglas was hired following Kai's departure. He worked for MJ for a total of about 5 weeks, leaving in early June. His job duties were primarily the same as Kai's, preparing healthy, organic meals for the family. He stated that he would serve them Asian-influenced and French-influenced upscale cuisine. Girl, whatever that means. I feel like he just called me broke. He described the house as very tranquil, with music playing, Dionne Warwick, instrumentals, or movie soundtracks.
Yeah.
How often would you say that you actually encountered Michael Jackson at his house?
Whenever he felt like being seen or around the kitchen, or whenever he had dinner with the family, the kids, my first impression was he was very dressed up. He looked like the Michael Jackson that, you know, everyone sees on TV when he's in public.
When it came to his relationships with MJ and the kids, it doesn't seem like he was as hands-on as Kai. He mentioned that Prince was pretty much the liaison between him and MJ.
There was a lot of feedback and instructions I would get from Prince concerning when Mr. Jackson wanted to eat or when Mr. Jackson felt it was comfortable for the kids to eat. Prince was pretty much like a go-between between Mr. Jackson and, you know, myself, and even security, you know. If there's something that, you know, they needed, you know, they would go to security and tell them what they needed.
In a Daily Mail interview in December 2011, he said that during his time working for Michael, he did not have one day off and developed an intense relationship with Murray and the rest of the Jackson staff. He remembered Murray carrying down empty oxygen tanks from Jackson's bedroom once, but just assumed it was part of the healthcare he needed.
Can you tell me a little bit about maybe Dr. Murray and your encounters with Dr. Murray?
Dr. Murray was on the property at least 5 nights a week. And my understanding was he was there all night to monitor Mr. Jackson. There was a couple occasions during my time of employment that I noticed Dr. Murray exiting the kitchen area through the side door to the driveway area carrying a couple of oxygen tanks. There was occasions where I noticed during my time of employment that in the security mobile unit that was located in the driveway in the back of the house area, that there was a few oxygen tanks there as well. The oxygen tanks were waist high from my height. The upper top portion of the tanks were green. The latter part of the tanks were silver. Heavy duty tanks. You know, I had a cautious feeling inside, but, you know, by a doctor being there, you know, that kind of, you know, passed by me.
He also recalled that he talked to Dr. Murray on a daily basis and would prepare food for him as well. Murray would pass along positive feedback from Michael, saying he liked the taste of the food and the preparation. Chef Douglas said that Michael would usually have breakfast alone in his room and that he would always eat it all and thank him when he came to pick up the tray. Right away, you can feel the shift. Compared to when Kai was around in April, the energy in the house was completely different. The dynamic between MJ, the kids, and Chef Douglas wasn't warm or playful. It felt more isolated and serious. Perhaps he just simply didn't have enough time to form that deeper bond. But one thing was for sure. In the short time that he was there, he could tell that something wasn't right.
Yes, he did look thin or slim. He was talking very slowly, and he was moving very slowly. The first couple of days, he was at a distance. You know, he had the surgical mask on. He had like this shower cap or surgical cap, you know, bluish color.
Were you shocked by Michael Jackson's death?
Was I shocked? No. because even beforehand, during my time of employment, I had mentioned to close members of my family, like my mother and my sister, I expressed to them, I said, I don't think he's going to survive this concert tour. You know, and they said, why? And I said, because, you know, that's too much stress and pressure on somebody like that. You know, it's like it's one thing if you're doing it for the love of it. It's another thing if you're doing it to get yourself out of debt.
At some point, Chef Douglas was asked about coming to London, but due to staff reductions and budget cuts, he ended up leaving. He did say that, allegedly, amongst the Jackson staff, it was known that if the children didn't like someone, they would tell Michael, and that person would be gone.
Certain people felt that the reason certain staff members were no longer there were possibly because of the kids. You know, if they didn't like an individual, or if they felt uncomfortable with an individual, you know, the word would get back to Mr. Jackson, and next thing you know, they were looking for someone else.
Personally, I don't think he could match the nurturing care Kai was able to provide. And aside from budget cuts, the kids could have told MJ Chef Douglas needed to hee into the wind. Nonetheless, Kai was asked to come back. Let's fast forward to June 2009. Kai stated she returned to work on June 2nd, 2009 after receiving a phone call from Michael Amir, per her AEG trial testimony. In June, the beginning of June, I received a phone call from Michael Amir, the same one who hired me and let me go. I received a phone call from him saying that Mr. Jackson and the children are requesting for you to come back. The energy in the house is not the same. The day Kai came back, the children were very excited and greeted her at the door. Paris had even created a shoebox called the Box of Happiness.
What's this back here, the Box of Happiness?
The Box of Happiness. You know, this is so special to me, this Box of Happiness. You know, when I came back June 2nd, I walked into the maid's quarters and putting on my uniform, and there it was sitting. And Paris had made this for me. And it had, you know, just beautiful gifts in there, and just, it's like, well, welcome home.
Also, a quick little factoid about the Box of Happiness. Author and longtime MJ fan Talitha Linehan was actually the one who originally gifted that box to Paris. It was filled with cute stationery and small toys. Paris ended up regifting it to Kai. Aside from her sweet reunion with the children, she became deeply concerned for Michael. She said he looked noticeably different, appearing weak, much thinner, and possibly even undernourished. She thought maybe he was being overworked or over-rehearsed.
When I came back in June, the third day in, he had asked me. He pulled me to the side and he said, you know, he told me, I need you. I know you know what you're doing. You do a very good job. I want you here. I need you to be here. I need you to keep feeding me healthy. Do you have my beet juice? Do you have my organic juices, my healthy food? I need to stay healthy and strong.
She claimed that Michael told her, "They're killing me," which is on par with what Prince said in his trial testimony.
And he did say to you at one point, "They're killing me," in reference to the fact that he was working so hard, rehearsing so hard.
Yes. They're killing me. They're killing me. I'm rehearsing very hard, you know, maybe 2 rehearsals a day.
He testified that the King of Pop was excited about the comeback tour, but in the weeks leading up to his death, he became really, really skinny, and his body temp would go up and down. Prince said his father would cry after phone calls, saying, quote, "They're going to kill me. They're going to kill me."
Kai also said that she recalled the pantry was bare. One side there was Fiji water. The refrigerator was bare. There was Coca-Cola, Red Bulls, and Starbucks coffee drinks. Upon seeing the empty pantry, she went grocery shopping at Whole Foods to buy organic food for the house. She explained that Whole Foods offers a card for chefs who have personal clients, but the credit card was declined, and she had no choice but to use her own money to pay for food to feed him and his family. She said this wasn't the first time the card had been declined. Sometimes she'd have to leave the groceries behind or pay for them herself. It's absolutely devastating how much had changed in the month Kai was gone. MJ went from being a vibrant person, holding conversations with her, talking about life, people, and places, to someone who needed the help of his 12-year-old son to carry him up the stairs, as she once observed. Kai felt obligated to get MJ as healthy as possible, even though she wasn't sure why he was deteriorating. Oh, I know why. And it rhymes with Schmonrad Schmurray. Kai said she first met Dr. Murray in the early weeks of April, but by June, he had become a daily presence in the house.
Dr. Murray, I saw him more routinely in June, and he was in the home and doing what he was supposed to as his doctor.
When would he show up?
I would see him in the mornings. I would see him in the mornings when I arrived to the house. And around 10:30, I'd see him when he'd come downstairs to retrieve a juice or some type of breakfast.
She found it strange that a doctor wasn't paying attention to Michael's eating habits. She said she asked him about it a couple of times, to which Murray would simply reply, "He doesn't eat that much. You can fix him anything." According to Kai, Michael was eating, but his portions were noticeably getting smaller. Just like Chef Douglas, she too noticed the oxygen tanks. There were fewer during the month of April, but by June...
You have said that when he would come downstairs when you first see him in the morning, he'd be carrying oxygen tanks.
I saw sometimes the oxygen tanks that he would carry downstairs.
Did you wonder what that was about?
Of course. Of course I did. You know, wasn't sure. I had never seen anything like that before. So I wondered to myself, I wonder what those are used for. But
this was something nobody else in the household spoke about?
No one spoke about that at all. It's just probably something that he was taking care of Mr. Jackson with.
They had noticeably increased. Obviously, there's more to this story, especially since Kai was in the house the day Michael died. But you guessed it, part 3 besties, it's gonna be intense. Now that we've casted the people in charge of fueling Michael's body, let's cast the person responsible for getting it in shape. MJ's personal trainer, Lou Ferrigno.
Well, he's always been lean. He might have been a little heavier 17 years ago. But you got to remember one thing you got to take into consideration. He was under tremendous threat, in debt, the ranch, the 3 kids. They financed a tour. At times in the past, he was supposed to perform, he canceled, and he had a major lawsuit. But this time, he was going to come back and make the biggest comeback in music history. So it was just tremendous threat, and he's at the age of 50. Besides, with me, he was rehearsing like 3-4 hours a day. It takes a toll on the body.
Lou Ferrigno is best known for playing the Incredible Hulk in the 1977 TV series, and for being a professional bodybuilder, competing alongside legends like Arnold Schwarzenegger. Long before 2009, Lou and Michael Jackson had been close friends for nearly 20 years, with Lou even training him during the History Tour. And might I say, Lou did his big one on Michael's physique during this era. I mean,
the behavior that you exhibited was whore-like. The whore jumped out, and then it jumped back in.
Well, we were friends for 20 years. I kept it a secret when I trained him 15 years ago. He did a tour called the History Tour.
The two of them deeply connected due to their similar upbringings. Both had difficult relationships with their fathers growing up. Lou used fitness as his escape, and Michael, of course, turned to music. They deeply admired each other's discipline and hit it off immediately.
He was a big fan of mine. He loved the Hulk and everything. So I had a doctor friend who was a friend of his. He suggested to Michael, have Lou train you because I have a facility, have it private, and he felt that I was the best. So Michael came to see me the first time, it kind of like, he had the mask on, came down the driveway, and then just gave me a hug. It wasn't nothing, nothing like anything staged. It was just like Lou and Mike would just hit it up because both of us had similar childhood. Well, I went to his Neverland Ranch. I'll never forget, he said, jump in the car. So he got the mask on his face, he's driving me around 60 miles around. I go, look at that elephant driving around, showing me his little zoo and everything. It was great.
Lou stated that in approximately March 2009, MJ called him personally to ask him to help him prepare for the tour.
He called me personally. And he said to me, can you help me because you're getting ready for the tour? He had very little time. And I said, okay, but I had to go to his house instead of him coming to my house because he had the kid. And the paparazzi was following him. So when I went to his house, I brought the equipment there. And he should feel at home again. And basically he was in good shape, but he had a lot of stress on him. I think he needed 2 years to get ready. He could not, it's too hard to do in 3 months.
One thing I really admire about Lou is that he always stood on business about my man Michael. In every interview I've seen, he talks about MJ with honesty and respect, never feeding into the media's go-to drug narrative. Instead, he highlights the pressure, the stress, and everything MJ was dealing with while trying to get ready for these shows. Now, let's talk about some of the things Lou actually did to help prepare MJ for the tour. Lou's goal was to build MJ's stamina, maintain his mobility, and keep his body performance ready without overexerting him. So they focused primarily on lighter workouts, things like stretching, core training, and weight training 3 to 4 times a week.
Lou Ferrigno, exactly what were you telling him to do? What kind of training were you giving him?
Well, he was doing a lot of core training. I went to his house, as a matter of fact. He used to come to my house years ago, but apparently because of the family, he needed to sleep late. So we did a lot of core exercises with the ball, very light band, weight training. He wanted to develop develop his shoulders more. He wanted to have more of that V-taper because he wanted to come back as the new Michael, and he wanted to restructure his whole body. So I designed a routine for him, and basically he did everything I told him what to do because he trusts me and he trusts anybody else because I knew his body well.
What kind of things were you doing to work out with him?
They had an exercise board. We did a lot of core training, a lot of exercise with band. He didn't want to weight train, so he mostly wanted to deal with flexibility and conditioning.
Any obvious pain whenever you trained?
He didn't look like he was in pain because he was on the treadmill. He did the stretching exercises. But you got to remember one thing, that the harder you work when you work on a tour, for example, or the dance and the training, of course you're going to be under a lot of strain and put the body under tremendous strain. So when I told Mike about all the flexibility, I told him to take a lot of calcium, magnesium supplements. It's just good for the joints and tendon. But with me, I mean, he seemed fine.
According to Lou's recollection, MJ always seemed fine during their workouts and was able to complete them with no issues. He appeared very motivated, constantly improving, and showed no signs of being in pain. Now, a lot of us might think the training Lou did wasn't enough. I mean, MJ was supposed to be doing a 50-show tour, and he was out here doing ball exercises and light resistance band training. But we also need to remember that on top of this, he was rehearsing.
I would finish training and then we go straight to the Staples Center. I mean, non-stop.
Yeah.
And he would usually eat like once a day.
You would eat once a day? I'm sorry, that's what you said? Oh.
Yeah, 1 meal a day. Always been like that. It's always been a night owl. Well, when I saw him, it might have been a little bit light, but you got to remember that dancing 4 or 5 hours a day under tremendous stress, and he was eating once a day, so he had a tendency to keep losing weight.
Hold up. He said MJ only ate once a day? Oh, you thought I wasn't gonna clock that tea?
Clock that tea. Clock it. Clock that tea. Clock it.
We gonna have to take a quick segue. Now, it's actually very believable that MJ may have only eaten once a day, and he was never a big eater and seemed to prefer small, simple, nutrient-dense meals. In fact, I believe he mentioned this in his 2005 interview with Reverend Jesse Jackson.
Well, I've never been a great eater. To tell a little secret, I hate to tell it, but I've never been a great eater or a great admirer of food, even though I appreciate food and the gift of food and how God has given us food to eat. But my mother has always had a hard time with me all my life, forcing me to eat. Elizabeth Taylor used to hand feed me at times because I do have a problem with eating, but I do my very best, and I am eating. Yes, I am. So I don't want anybody to think I'm starving. I'm not.
Prior to that interview, in about 2000 to 2001, he again discussed his difficulties with eating, especially during stressful times, with Rabbi Shmuley. But on my Mariah Carey type-ish, I don't know him.
I wouldn't eat. Took the spoon and would put it to my mouth. So when I get really upset or hurt, I don't eat. I go on food. I just eat. So I'm unconscious. Then they started doing it intravenously, you know. My body breaks down. I won't eat.
It seems that at some point, MJ was at least eating lunch and dinner. Kai Chase referenced making him lunch to take to rehearsals and mentioned how he would always try to have dinner with his children once he returned home. But on the other hand, MJ was definitely someone who could get completely wrapped up in what he was doing and forget to eat, which makes me think that he wasn't eating at rehearsals all the time. Even Randy Phillips said he had to hire someone just to make sure Michael was eating.
Concert promoter Randy Phillips admits he was worried that Jackson was literally wasting away.
I was concerned about his weight in that he wasn't eating, and I actually brought in someone whose sole job it was to make sure he ate. My biggest concern with Michael is he wouldn't eat. You know, I actually assigned someone to remind him to eat.
As time went on, both Kai and Chef Douglas noticed that MJ's portions were decreasing, as we discussed earlier. Lou has mentioned many times that on top of everything else, this could have been due to the immense pressure and stress Michael was under. From what I understand, Lou trained Michael consistently through March, April, and May, but was away toward the end of May into June attending a bodybuilding convention. So technically, he wasn't around to witness the change in Michael that June, when much of the Team MJ crew and several AEG executives started seriously questioning whether he was physically ready to do these shows.
Well, I haven't seen him since the end of May. I've been gone. I've been on a tour doing convention. I was planning to come back to train him a few more times before he left to go on tour. And the last month, I don't know, because when I saw him, I heard reports like the last month, apparently he lost weight, but he looked fine to me. And he said, take care of yourself. I said, Michael, I'm going to see you within about 10 days. He said, take care of yourself. I love you. It gave me a funny feeling because I knew something was wrong because he was under tremendous pressure. And that kind of really concerned me.
In the end, I truly believe Lou did his best to help Michael and genuinely valued him as a close friend. That kind of support was something MJ desperately needed in those final months, especially as his circle kept shrinking and fewer people around him seemed to have his best interests at heart. Now that we've covered the people responsible for Michael's physique and nutritional well-being, let's shift the focus to the ones in charge of keeping him safe and on schedule, starting with the role of his personal assistant, Michael Amir Williams, aka Brother Michael. As we dive into the discussions of Michael Amir, Faheem Muhammad, and Alberto Alvarez, I'm not going to get into anything related to June 25th, 2009, the day Michael Jackson died. This part is about understanding what roles they played while Michael was alive. I will have to touch on that day briefly when it comes to Alberto, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, darling. Michael Amir Williams was Michael Jackson's personal assistant, but he didn't start out that way. He first started showing up in 2007. According to Bill Whitfield, he'd first been introduced to Mr. Jackson by Feldman. I believe he's referring to John Feldman, MJ's previous assistant. Back when we were staying at the Monte Cristo house. That's when his name first came up. Then he was around while we were in Virginia. He started out like an intern. He was cataloging all of Mr. Jackson's books with a computer program, helping Mr. Jackson with his film projects, doing stuff like that.
I was commonly known as his personal assistant. How long had you been employed in any capacity with Michael Jackson prior to June 25th, 2009?
I was hired as a personal assistant in mid-2007, approximately June, around that time. And before then, I was in full-time. I would just help with film and different things that I did for film. I went to USC, and that's what I was brought on to kind of help manage his. He had a huge film library of books and DVDs.
And so you were brought on to what, archive and organize?
Archive and organize.
And then in mid-2007, you were hired on in a full-time capacity as a personal assistant?
Correct.
So you're telling me a random film student somehow ended up as the personal assistant to the Hee-Hee Man?
How, Sway?
I mean, I guess this just proves that Michael Jackson really would give anyone a chance if he saw potential in them, which apparently he did with Michael Amir, but I still find it weird. Like, what were his credentials? We all know MJ had a habit of jumping the gun and being way too trusting with people. Apparently, Bill had questioned it a little bit too. Michael Amir was communicating with Mr. Jackson every day. Since Grace wasn't around, he started taking over some of the things that Grace used to do. I started to notice that when he came to the Palms, he wouldn't even have to ask us if Mr. Jackson was in his room or the studio. He already knew, and he'd go straight to wherever Mr. Jackson was. They seemed to be getting closer and closer. On the one hand, I was cool with it because I wouldn't have to do so much running around. On the other hand, I also wondered what his agenda was. Anyway, aside from archiving and organizing in the beginning, what did this man actually do?
As Michael Jackson's personal assistant, what were your responsibilities, Mr. Williams?
I managed day-to-day schedules, arranged, set up phone calls, meetings, planned trips. Okay. Anything big to anything small.
Would you also consider yourself to have been a friend of Michael's?
Oh, yes, sir.
You would see him on a daily basis?
Yes, sir. Several times a day.
Were you also responsible for kind of being a liaison between the security detail and Mr. Jackson?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Staff, mainly immediate staff, housekeepers and nannies, chefs, security.
Okay. You would be the liaison?
Correct, yes, sir.
Okay. Were you part of the planning and or arrangements to proceed to the rehearsals during the month of May and June 2009?
Yes, sir, I was.
Okay. And did that include rehearsals in Burbank at Center Staging?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Would you actually accompany Mr. Jackson to these rehearsals?
Unless he had me on a different assignment, I would.
Okay. And did that include then the rehearsals at the Forum as well?
Yes, sir.
I guess due to the nature of the trial, he conveniently forgot to mention that he was heavily involved with AEG and played a key role in keeping Michael restricted during the last few weeks of his life.
Clock that T. Clock it. Clock that T. Clock it.
I mean, I commend Michael Amir for his loyalty to MJ in the sense that, since his passing, he's kept pretty quiet about his time working for him. Being in his inner circle since 2007, and arguably being the person who spent the most one-on-one time with him outside of Dr. Murray, he could have said a lot, but hasn't, to my knowledge. I mean, the most he's really done is sue AEG back in 2012. Claiming he and the rest of the employees connected with the This Is It tour lost lots of money because the company negligently hired and supervised Dr. Murray. Crazy how you waited 3 years though, but I'm willing to bet you can guess what happened with that. It was dismissed. It's over. Go home. he ended up having to pay costs for AEG and the MJ estate, which he dragged into his mess. Now you know Branca don't play that ish. But let's get back to Michael Amir's deep involvement with AEG. Now, of course, as Michael's personal assistant, communicating with AEG would have been part of the job. They were in charge of the tour, after all. Still, he was involved in several decisions that contributed to MJ's growing isolation, like the hiring of Dr. Murray, the firing of Kai Chase, and presumably other staff changes within the Jackson camp. Alongside members of the security team, he also controlled who had access to Michael, allegedly at the jurisdiction of AEG. Allegedly, Schmandy Schmillips. After a meeting at Center Staging in May 2009, where MJ expressed his frustrations with the pressure and schedule of the tour to a group of fans, those comments were leaked to the British press. To quote longtime fan and author of a real-life fairy tale, Michael Jackson and Me, Talitha Linehan, several people who worked closely with Michael on This Is It told us after his passing that his entourage had been under strict instruction to keep us away from Michael following our meeting with him at the studio. They said that the powers that be hadn't wanted any more media reports claiming that he was unhappy about the tour because it made them look bad and, heaven forbid, might affect the sales of those remaining high-priced tickets. They also hadn't wanted anyone telling him to cancel the shows if he didn't want to do them. Their priority was profit, not Michael, and so it was in their best interest to keep him isolated and controlled, not strengthened. Oh girl, say that again for the people in the back. Amen. It appears Michael Amir was also well aware that as preparations went on, MJ was stressed out and not sleeping properly. And if that's the case, you're probably wondering, why didn't he do anything? And to keep it a buck, it wasn't really his place. His one job was to keep Michael on track, to, get through his daily tasks and stay focused on the upcoming London shows. Anything outside of that was out of his jurisdiction. I just think it's crazy how he was able to just go along with outside forces allegedly telling him to keep Michael Jackson on lockdown, even though his boss, Michael Jackson, didn't want that. But I guess whoever signs the paychecks gets the final say, right? And I suppose when you're close friends and work with Mr. Fix-It, I mean Faheem Muhammad, you acquire a masterclass in the power of making people and problems disappear. And don't you dare think for a second I didn't clock that Bill Whitfield had also worked for he who shall not be named at one point. Bombastic side-eye. Criminally offensive side-eye. Bitch.
The tea is exceptionally good today. Who made this? Very delicious. Hold on.
Now, Faheem was the chief of Michael Jackson's security, a position he'd only held for 10 months by the time MJ died. And let's not skip over the fact that Faheem was only 21, fresh out of college with a bachelor's in business administration, concentrating in real estate and marketing, and within a year, he landed a lucrative position with Michael Jackson. The hee-hee man, the king of pop, right out the gate, just like that. Oh God! Excuse me while I have a quick cry about my life choices.
I was the chief of his security, so my responsibilities ranged from making sure his house was protected, making sure his children's were protected, and making sure his day-to-day activities and movement was all safe and planned and mapped out.
And would you typically deal with Mr. Jackson directly, or would you deal with Mr. Jackson typically through Michael Amir Williams?
Typically through Michael Amir Williams.
And when you came on about 10 months before June 2009, did you come into employment as chief of security, or were you working in a different capacity, or
driver?
Initially as a driver?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then you were you promoted to chief of security?
Yes, sir. Basically, yes, sir.
Okay.
When it comes to Faheem and his role specifically while working for Michael Jackson, because he didn't start working with he who shall not be named until after MJ passed, there's really not much to say outside of what he revealed during the 2011 Conrad Murray trial. Just like Michael Amir, he was part of the initiative to keep MJ on lockdown, and that alone don't sit right with me. Like, imagine being a 50-year-old global icon and this 21-year-old, not even old enough to rent a car in some places, tells you that you can't say hello to your fans. I mean, that's just crazy work to me personally. To my knowledge, Faheem has been relatively quiet about his time with Michael and keeps a low profile, which I actually find commendable. You know, MJ wasn't granted much privacy in life, and he was given even less of that in death, so in that regard, I respect the silence. Now, the final spot we're going to cast in our security team goes to Alberto Alvarez. Alberto was part of MJ's advanced team as the director of logistics.
I was director of logistics.
What does that mean?
Basically what I would do, route surveys, hotel surveys, establish communication with PD, establish communication with upper management at any venue that he would be arranged to come into. Well, I was part of the advance team, and what I would do is I'd make sure everything was clear or in its proper place.
This wasn't Alberto's first time around when it came to working security for Michael.
I've worked with him since 2004 on and off, but at that point I was called back. I believe it was December 31st or January 1st, sir.
Of December 31st of 2008 or January of 2009?
Correct, sir.
Okay.
And listen, despite all the tea I'm about to clock, despite all the shade I may or may not throw, despite all the edges I may snatch, I think Alberto seems like a decent guy. He gave the impression that working for Michael actually meant something to him. He's even said he's turned down hundreds of thousands of dollars in deals to do interviews and tell-alls.
Have you been approached by media outlets to give an interview?
Yes, I have.
About how many times?
Various times, over 20, 30 times.
Have you agreed to participate in any of these media interviews?
No, sir.
Have you been offered money to participate in these?
I have.
About how many times have you been offered money to sit down for a media interview?
I would say about 9, 10 times.
How much money have you been offered?
Up to the sums of $200,000, and remember one offered me $500,000.
And you said no?
I said no.
The National Enquirer offered you $200,000?
That is correct, sir.
Which, yes, is the bare minimum anyone with a celebrity client should do. But when it comes to Michael Jackson, once again, that kind of loyalty is rare. Alberto has actually been in some trouble with the law. In 2000, he was charged with felony DV for bodily injury to a spouse or intimate partner and disturbing the peace. He was also sentenced to 3 years of probation. He was charged with maliciously and willfully disturbing another person by loud and unreasonable noise. As part of his plea agreement, the judge dismissed the DV allegation in the interest of justice. In October of 2009, he was convicted of a DUI and driving without a license. He was again given 3 years of probation, a $390 fine, in order to complete a 3-month licensed first offender alcohol and other drug education and counseling program. Apparently, shortly after MJ's death in June of 2009, the Jackson family kept Alberto employed at the family home in Encino, but he was fired in early 2010, presumably as a result of them finding out about his criminal record and feeling it wouldn't be safe to have him around MJ's children. Allegedly, though, because I don't know how true that is. Please don't sue me. Thank you. As if that wasn't enough, Alberto got a second DUI in September 2011, which landed him 4 years probation, 8 days in LA County Jail, and a court-mandated 18-month alcohol and other drug education counseling program for DUI second offenders. What I will say about all of this, the aftermath of MJ's death was probably still weighing on him heavily. That on top of losing his job with the Jackson family, dealing with the emotional fallout, and struggling financially, I imagine homeboy was going through it.
Mr. Alvarez, has anything good come from this tragic incident for you?
No, sir.
What has it done to your life?
No, it's caused a lot of financial problems. You know, just really don't have steady, and so I went from a great salary to hardly anything.
Plus, both of these incidents line up with major Michael Jackson-related moments. This Is It premiered in October 2009, and he testified during the Conrad Murray trial in September 2011. Now, I'm not saying that's why he did what he did, and I want to be very clear. I don't support or excuse his behavior in any way, but I do think it's fair to acknowledge that he was likely in a dark place. Now, earlier, I said we weren't going to dive too deep into what happened on June 25th, 2009. That's a whole video in itself. But when it comes to Alberto specifically, I think it's important to mention his actions that day because they were unexpected, to say the least. Now, in this retelling, some details may be omitted for time's sake, but I'm just trying to focus on the parts involving Alberto and Dr. Murray. So, if you do not wish to hear about the scene of Michael Jackson's death, please feel free to use the timestamps below to skip forward. Basically, after Dr. Murray realized MJ wasn't breathing, he made a call to Michael Amir, not 911. Don't piss me off. Michael Amir then called Alberto, who was outside in the security trailer on the side of the house, and told him to go inside. So Alberto runs in, heads upstairs, and walks in Michael's bedroom, only to see Murray giving MJ one-handed chest compressions on the bed. I know I said don't piss me off. At some point, Murray stops compressions, picks up some vials, and instructs Alberto to grab the vials and a nearby IV bag containing propofol and stuff them into another blue bag.
He reached over and grabbed a handful of vials. And then he reached out to me and said, "Here, put these in a bag."
Did you grab a bag?
I did. I looked towards my right, and there was a plastic bag sitting on top of a chair. Okay. And so I proceeded to get the bag, and I opened it, and he placed the vials in the bag.
Okay, so you held the bag open, and he, just dropped the vials in there?
Yes, sir. He reached into the bag and dropped the vials.
Okay. And did you then put that bag somewhere?
Yes, he proceeded to instruct me. He said, now place that bag in a brown bag. And there was a brown bag that was on the side of a chair on the floor.
Okay.
Essentially, Alberto inadvertently helped Murray seemingly clean up the crime scene, which delayed calling 911 and getting MJ the help he needed. Though honestly, by that point, I believe it was already too late. His reasoning for doing this was because...
Let me ask you, Mr. Alvarez, why were you following these instructions to assist in collecting these vials and the saline bag?
Well, in my personal experience, I believe that Dr. Conrad Murray had the best instruction. So I didn't question his authority at the time. I knew it was a medical emergency, so I proceeded to follow Mr. Conrad Murray's instructions.
Okay. What did you think what did you think these items were being packed up for, if anything?
I thought we were packing to getting ready to go to the hospital.
So basically, Alberto said that because Murray was the doctor in the room and was supposed to have the proper training and knowledge to handle situations like this, he trusted his authority. And based on what Alberto knew at the time, I don't think he was being untruthful in saying that. We also have to acknowledge that this was a highly tense, stressful, fast-moving situation. And in moments like that, your body can go into trauma response mode. You know, fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Murray, as the medical professional, should have been better equipped to handle it, especially since he had experience working in emergency departments where things like that happen more frequently. But Alberto obviously did not have that kind of training. Now, I don't like the choice he made at that moment, and I could sit here and say that if I were in that room, I would have called 911, but the truth is, I feel like until you're in a life or death situation like that, you really don't know what you would do because of the adrenaline and everything that goes into situations like that. And it's clear that that day weighed heavily on Alberto, and for a while, I'm sure he replayed that moment in his head over and over, wishing he had done something different. Nonetheless, like I said earlier, I genuinely believe Alberto seems like a decent guy, and clearly MJ liked him enough to keep him employed on and off since 2004. Michael, Amir, and Faheem, though, they kind of give me the ick, as the kids on the Clock app say. Mainly because they rose into these high-paying, high-trust positions at such young ages without any real experience, at least not that we've seen. So far, we've casted the roles of the doctor, the chefs, the trainer, and the security guards, each playing their part in the final act of Michael Jackson's life. Now it's time for us to cast our final characters. Let's bring in the people who saw MJ on a daily basis for months. I've dubbed Team MJ. Team MJ consists of everyone involved in the day-to-day rehearsals and those Michael personally handpicked for the tour, most of whom had been working with him for decades. So without further ado, let's give it up for our showrunner, the co-director and co-creator of the This Is It shows, Kenny Ortega. We briefly talked about Kenny back in part 2 of the series when I covered the end of March 2009, right after the press conference, as preparations for the shows were just starting to pop off. Kenny Ortega is a director and choreographer with a stacked resume, darling. He's directed Olympic ceremonies, choreographed music videos for legends like Madonna and Olivia Newton-John, and more importantly, shaped pivotal parts of my childhood with the Cheetah Girls 2, all 3 High School Musical movies, and Hocus Pocus. Oh, I stan Legend Tega, but don't get it twisted, cause I'm still gonna clock your T, Kenneth. Kenny began first working with Michael on the Dangerous tour.
I met Michael in 1990.
And do you remember under what circumstances you met him?
Yes, Michael called me at my home and expressed an interest in working with me creatively on an upcoming tour.
And which tour was that?
That was the Dangerous tour.
And what was your role on the Dangerous tour?
On the Dangerous tour, I was the co-creator of the show itself with Michael, and I was the director of the production.
In addition to the Dangerous tour, were there other, prior to This Is It, were there other tours you were involved in with Michael?
Yes. I also was Michael's co-creative partner on History, the History tour, and also a couple of other one-off concert productions for charity.
The one-off concerts he's referring to are Michael Jackson's canceled 1995 HBO special, One Night Only, where he was a consultant, and the MJ and Friends tour in 1999. The two of them had been working side by side for decades. Kenny was someone I assume MJ trusted and valued deeply. Their professional relationship was always rooted in collaboration and creativity. In the final years of MJ's life, that dynamic became more personal. They'd talk on the phone and occasionally spend time together. MJ even took his kids to see High School Musical: The Concert, a tour where the cast performed songs from the film Kenny directed. As early as 2007, the two had regular conversations about teaming up again if MJ ever returned to the stage. And in April 2009, that moment finally came.
It really, excited him. He wanted to do this, I think, really more than any other project that I'd ever worked with him on.
Right. Because he called you how many years ago?
Oh, over 20, right. when it all started. But I mean, for the last couple of years, we've been really looking for the right project. And Michael ultimately called me and said, Kenny, this is it. This is the one.
This is it.
This is it.
This is it.
And how did you become involved then on the This Is It tour?
I was first informed by AEG that Michael had an interest in involving me in a planned tour, and then Michael reached out to me personally.
And can you describe that conversation, please?
Just that he was very excited, and he used the expression, this is it, a number of times during the telephone conversation, and I remembered saying to him, you should just call it, this is it. You've said it so many times. He was just very excited. He was, this is it, this is the time, there's great reason to do this now. I'm excited about this, and I want you to be a part of this with me. Will you do this with me?
And did you agree to do it?
I was involved in other projects at the time, but I told Michael that I would do everything I could to clear myself so that I could be a part of it with him.
Okay, and were you able to do that?
Yes.
Overall, Kenny seems genuinely proud and grateful to have worked with Michael. You can tell they shared the same fire for creativity and artistry. He's consistently spoken with deep admiration about their time together, even after MJ's passing. And when it came to the darker side of those final moments, Kenny was one of the key figures who sounded the alarm about MJ's declining health, aside from Karen Faye, but don't worry, we'll get to her, she said begrudgingly. Although the emails Kenny sent to AEG higher-ups like Randy Phillips and Paul Gongaware will play a pivotal role in part 3, I'm going to share a few now just so you can see the genuine caring place he was coming from before I effectively tear it all down. On June 14th, 2009, Kenny would send the following email to Paul Gongaware. MJ did not have a good Friday, and he didn't show on Saturday. He has been habitually late, the norm. I realize he's up against a lot. I have a ton of love and sympathy for what he's been through. We must do all that we can as a team to stay on top of his needs every day. He requires more attention and management. As I mentioned, I truly believe he needs nourishment, guidance, and physical therapy/massage for his fatigued muscles and injuries. He is not in great physical shape. We can't let him slip. I'm doing all I can every day to build up his confidence and to create a show that will help to ready him and to arrive us at our goals. And every time he is late or cancels, it chisels away at that possibility. There could be no more calls to Travis asking him to come to the house. MJ needs to be told that it's time to get real. He must take care of himself so that he can meet the schedule, or there are going to be consequences. We need a healthy, rested, and ready MJ at the Forum and Staples for all the remaining rehearsals, as well as the few we have at the O2 in July. Oh, and in case you're curious about Paul's response to this email, it was, Frank and I have discussed it already and have requested a face-to-face meeting with the doctor, hopefully Monday. We want to remind him that it is AEG, not MJ, who is paying his salary. We want him to understand what is expected of him. He's been dodging Frank so far. Now let's compare this to an email that Kenny sent on June 20th, 2009 to Randy Phillips. Randy, I am at home awaiting your call or instructions. I honestly don't think he is ready for this based on his continued physical weakening and deepening emotional state. It is reminiscent of what Karen, Bush, Travis, and I remembered just before he fainted, causing the HBO concerts to be canceled. There are strong signs of paranoia, anxiety, and obsessive-like behavior. I think the very best thing we can do is get a top psychiatrist in to evaluate him ASAP. I am doing my best to be objective, offering as intelligent observation as I can, being his friend and a concerned adult. I honestly felt if I had encouraged or allowed him on stage last night, he could have hurt himself. I believe we need professional guidance in this matter. Now, based on just these two emails, it's clear MJ was not well, and Kenny was deeply concerned. But of course, his warnings fell on deaf ears. In fact, Randy Phillips verbatim told him it is critical that neither you, me, or anyone around this show become amateur psychiatrists or physicians. Randy's focus unsurprisingly, stayed on the money and the fallout that would come from pulling the plug. From his perspective, canceling the shows would be a massive financial blow to AEG and also a major L for Michael, who was already buried under lawsuits, surrounded by vultures, and facing a public that largely doubted he could pull this off. At some point, it feels like Kenny gave up though, like he realized it was easier to just go with the flow since no one was really listening to him. Maybe he started to feel like people around MJ weren't his friends the way he considered himself to be. And when you're up against a major corporation like AEG, fighting back probably felt like a losing battle. He didn't have the same power or authority they did, meaning he didn't sign the paychecks. So eventually, he might have felt pressured to just stay in his lane and focus on the show, even if his gut was telling him something was wrong. Now, I mentioned I read an email from June 20th, 2009, the day after MJ showed up to rehearsals in really rough shape. The next rehearsals were on June 23rd and 24th, where MJ gave the best performance he had in weeks, so maybe that's what caused Kenny's tune to change. But even with that, we know how he really felt. The emails don't lie. His mouth, though, that's another story.
Well, it shows his commitment and his capability. You know, he was there, that Michael was there, present within his body, you know, his heart was into it. There was a lot of creative jousting and, you know, and wonder, you know, and you know, you weren't always 100% certain with Michael. Michael had his own process, but at the end of the day, no one wanted it more. And I think that you see that.
We're the four guys who spent the most time with him in the last 3 months of his life, conceiving and putting together, and fighting and loving and hugging. So we just felt compelled to come on and to set the record straight.
He wanted these shows. You know, we sit and we watch past shows and you could feel.
I'm sorry. Does this man look like RuPaul to anyone else?
There's been so much controversy, obviously, over his death and what he looked like and what he was like in rehearsals. When you see this, you know, he looked like he was really in perfect form, but really, really, really skinny. And to look that skinny on film means you got to be really skinny. So what were you thinking? Were you worried about his health?
I did, but, you know, he was like, I'm at my fighting weight. This is my dancing weight. I like to be at this weight, you know, and that voice of his. But, you know, we looked after him, you know, we were a family, and as families do, you know, are you hungry? Did you eat? You know, that we had a refrigerator stocked full of, healthy drinks and food, and you know, as a family, did our best to look out for each other, especially Michael.
With both of these interviews taking place after Michael's death and during the promotion of the This Is It film, do I expect Kenny to just come out and tell the truth about MJ's declining health? No. He had a film to promote, and the clear objective was to present the narrative that MJ was in good spirits, fully ready for the shows, and tragically taken before he could take the stage. Not that he was screaming, crying, and throwing up behind the scenes, but if he truly felt as strongly as he did in those emails, maybe he shouldn't have said anything at all. He could have stepped back, refused to promote the film, and simply said it was too painful for him to be involved, having just lost a close friend. But how would that have looked for AEG? The showrunner, Kenny Ortega, not supporting the film? That might seem a little sus. Of course, when there's money involved, it's a whole lot easier to lie though, right? Suddenly grief gets packaged and the truth gets edited.
We want to open with confidence and securely, and with integrity.
Nothing to do with Michael being ill. No sign that he's ill. He's in great shape.
What is the latest on Michael's health?
I would trade my body for his tomorrow. He's in fantastic shape. And, you know, words are cheap, and I've refuted all the crazy stories. He's not sleeping with elephants.
What?
Okay, but as far as really talking about his health, his director can answer that question better than I can.
No, I just say that physically and mentally, I mean, we're having a blast. We really are. We're having a great time. This is a high time for Michael.
Before I fully move on from Kenny Ortega, I'd like to take a moment to mention dancer, choreographer, and producer Alif Sankey. She had worked closely with Kenny on numerous projects for over 20 years prior to her involvement in This Is It as the associate producer. Her first encounter with Michael Jackson was during the making of his short film for Smooth Criminal, aka his best short film, Argue with the Wall. Per her AEG trial testimony, "It was amazing. It will always be the best job of my career. Michael's process is genius. The way he can visualize it and it would happen. Smooth Criminal is part of the film Moonwalker. We got to see Michael's imagination. That was the first time as an artist/dancer that I was completely inspired by his craft and attention to every detail. He never missed a thing. He paid attention to every detail of the entire process. I was inspired. I call it magic. It was absolutely magical to work with him. I dream to this day that I will be able to create on that level of magic that Michael created. It was living a dream to work with an artist like that. Just a dream, and I will treasure it and have it in my memory forever." After Smooth Criminal, she would go on to work with Michael again in 1991 for the MTV 10th anniversary special as a dancer, in 1996 at the Brit Awards in London, and in October of 2001 for the United We Stand benefit concert as a production coordinator. During all of these shows, she never had concerns about Michael's health. She didn't really notice anything different until about 2006 when she met Michael again while working as Kenny's personal assistant. Per her trial testimony, "He was very thin. He didn't look like he did the last time I saw him in 2001. I hugged him and he felt different. I've hugged Michael before. In 1996 I hugged him, and his body, as I described, he was always thin. He had muscle mass, like marble. He had a hard body. And when I hugged him in 2006, he didn't feel like that anymore. He felt thin. He just felt thin." Fast forward to about April 2009, she would get a call from Kenny to work as the associate producer for This Is It. In this role, her job was overseeing every aspect of the show's logistics, lighting, costumes, staging, graphics, video, makeup, hair, making sure the dancers were healthy and ready to perform. She was Kenny's point person. Things would come through her, and she would pass them on to Kenny or vice versa. One thing about Alif Sankey is she stood 10 toes down about my man Michael. From the beginning, she had concerns about him being physically able to pull off these shows, stating that MJ needed to build his weight and mass since his muscle mass was extremely thin. She even recommended that Travis Payne, MJ's choreographer, bring a ballet bar so Michael could stretch properly and possibly try Pilates to prepare his body for dancing after he told her MJ was feeling sore. She also recalled noticing that the bottoms of MJ's shoes had holes in them, and she was the one who went to Michael Amir to report it, telling him that MJ couldn't rehearse properly in shoes that were falling apart. As preparations continued, MJ was noticeably absent from rehearsals, particularly at the beginning of June. She recalled conversations with Kenny during that time, noting his growing frustration. This was the point when her concern began to deepen, which she expressed to him through emails and phone calls. On June 4, 2009, she sent Kenny Ortega the following: "Dear Kenny, I am taking this time to channel this message to you before I come into work. You may share this message with the team and with Michael if you'd like. I left work last night very sad and upset because I know this cannot fail. Kenny, I have seen Michael on stage in London wearing one of Zaldi's designs in a dream. I've had the same dream 3 different times over a year ago. My dreams have come to pass. I know I don't share that part of my life with you very much. There's a lot that I see, but please, Kenny, trust what I'm telling you. Michael has to do this tour. There are higher forces at work here. I never thought I would be in this position, but I know I was guided here by something greater. It has all felt so magical and surreal. If Michael doesn't do this tour, there will be an upset in the balance of many things connecting all of us to him. The best of the best have come together to bring him back, and you have always been the #1 person he has listened to and respected all these years. Kenny, I know how to help him. I know what needs to be said to him. Please let me help you bring him back into that magical light. Please let me help you help him find what was lost, his grail."
Honey.
Now I know this email in particular has a hint of conspiracy, which I've actively tried to avoid throughout this series, but in retrospect, what she said wasn't entirely false. Michael did have to do this tour, and there were definitely higher forces at work, but do with that what you will. I briefly touched on June 19th, 2009, the day Michael showed up to rehearsals in such rough shape that he was ultimately sent home. This day will be covered extensively in part 3, but for now, I want to focus on Alif Sankey's recollection of that night. She recalled being distraught and deeply concerned, weeping alongside Kenny Ortega. According to her, Michael had told Kenny that he heard God speaking to him. On her way home from the forum, Sankey became so overwhelmed that she pulled over to the side of the road to call Kenny. She remembered screaming into the phone, convinced that Michael was dying and needed to be taken to a hospital. By that point, she was bawling, pleading for someone to step in and questioning why no one was doing anything. She made Kenny promise to go to Michael's home to check on him, then hung up the phone and drove home. In her trial testimony, she stated that Kenny did relay her concerns to AEG, but no action was taken by anyone there, which, as we should know by now, is no surprise. Let's move on to RuPaul. Oh shit, I meant Travis Payne. I mean, no sun bias, sis, but do y'all see the resemblance? Is it because they're both, bald black brothers? Let me cut my own mic. Travis Payne is a dancer, producer, director, and choreographer who worked with Michael Jackson from the Dangerous era all the way through This Is It. Beyond his work with Michael, he's also collaborated with artists like Janet Jackson, Diana Ross, and Mariah Carey, to name a few. You can look at pretty much every major Michael Jackson tour, After Bad, televised performance, or even his later short films, and chances are, Travis Payne's name is on it. This man gave us the Ghost choreography, and for that alone, they could never make me hate you. But they can still make me give you this bombastic, criminally offensive side-eye. And I definitely will. Talks of Travis working on This Is It began in March 2009. At the time, he was actually working on a project with Kenny Ortega in Las Vegas. Kenny had received a phone call from Michael while they were having lunch. Travis details this in MJ Cast episode 124, the Travis Payne special.
I remember Kenny and I being in Las Vegas working on the opening of the Encore Resort and Casino. And Kenny's cell phone ringing, and his eyes got big, and he was mouthing to me, "It's Michael, it's Michael." I said, "Great, have the call." They talked for a little while, and then he handed me the phone, and I heard Michael, and he said, "Travis?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "It's time. This is it. It's time to do it." I said, "Great, we were just waiting on you." "Great. So you and Kenny come see me?" "Great, we're on our way. As soon as we finish here in Vegas, we'll come see you." That was really the beginning. And shortly after, we started our meetings at Carrollwood and then got into specifics of what it would be. And Michael was very clear. He had already partnered with AEG and Brandy Phillips and had several conversations about what's possible. And we just got into the process.
By April 2009, he was officially on board as associate director and choreographer, working alongside Stacy Walker, who also served as an associate choreographer. Before we continue with Travis, let's take a quick segue to talk about Stacy. Although she doesn't play as big of a role as Travis in our story, the two of them did work side by side and have continued to collaborate on numerous projects even after This Is It. Stacy Walker is a choreographer and director who's worked with artists like Usher, Lady Gaga, and Britney Spears. She actually first worked with Michael Jackson as a dancer in the Ghost short film, and later joined the History World Tour for about 6 months as one of the 2 female dancers featured in The Way You Make Me Feel. I believe she was part of the 1997 leg of that tour. Stacy worked directly with the dancers for This Is It, while Travis focused primarily on Michael himself, often rehearsing with him separately, either in another room or at his home. With that, let's get into these rehearsals. Just like Michael's physique, a huge part of the many contingencies of This Is It revolved around rehearsals. So let's dive into that as we work our way through Travis Payne. Rehearsals for This Is It started on March 28, 2009, and outside of MJ's private rehearsals with Travis in his home, they would take place at Center Staging, the Forum, now known as the Kia Forum, and the Staples Center, now known as the Crypto.com Arena. What a stupid name. MJ would also spend time at Culver Studios, where he was working on the Dome Project, basically where all the mini-movies were being shot for the show. The Smooth Criminal sequence, the 3D version of Thriller, Earth Song, and MJ Air. The majority of rehearsals were held at Center Staging, with the move to the Forum happening in early June, and the shift to Staples about a week or so before Michael's death. According to Kenny Ortega, the reason for moving was a need for more space. The show was becoming bigger and bigger, and he wanted rehearsals in a venue that matched the scale of the O2 Arena in London. During the initial stages of rehearsal, again, according to Kenny, MJ was reporting to Center Staging 3 to 4 times a week. This number would later increase to about 5 to 6 times a week, with him only having Sundays off, as shown in this copy of the rehearsal schedule for the months of May through July 2009. These rehearsals primarily took place in the late afternoon into the evening and could last around 5 to 7 hours. But let's be clear, Michael wasn't physically rehearsing the entire time. He was also participating in production meetings, creative discussions, and other elements essential to bringing the show together. Based on the rehearsal schedule, it's easy to see why Michael quickly started to burn out and was feeling like AEG was running him like a machine. According to Dr. Murray, as much as I hate quoting his dumpster fire of a book, I found it dismaying that once Michael began preparing for his tour, there were no more days of laughter. The stress placed on Michael by AEG was enormous. He was so wound up that it was almost impossible for him to even get a few fitful hours of sleep. Michael kept telling me that the AEG team was working him too hard, just as if he was a machine. Meanwhile, the AEG execs were telling me that the problem with rehearsals falling behind schedule was that Michael wasn't working hard enough. Phillips was always very worried about Jackson's inability to perform at rehearsals. He appeared to be very concerned and frustrated.
Now, in my dealings with him, okay, he was spot on and very engaged. Okay, my problem with him was he didn't like to work as hard as I thought he needed to work. Okay, and the truth is, Mike, the truth, he didn't need to. He had like muscle memory when he got on that stage and started dancing.
It's common knowledge that Michael never went all out in rehearsals. He always aimed to save his energy for the actual show. On top of that, both Stacy and Travis stated that there wasn't any new choreography created for This Is It aside from the drill section and They Don't Care About Us. So essentially, all the routines had already been done long ago, originally created by Michael himself. That's why Travis's role was more about reimagining the choreo, updating where needed, and making sure everything felt age appropriate for where Michael was at in 2009. I can only assume this is part of the reason why Michael felt like he didn't need to rehearse as much or even physically show up to rehearsals at times. With that being said, the schedule that was set for him at the time was very demanding, especially for someone who hadn't done this kind of work in over 12 years. Dr. Murray included a copy of Michael's itinerary in his book from before it got changed around the time rehearsal shifted to the Forum in June. Based on the AEG trial testimony of Travis Payne and Kenny Ortega's Conrad Murray trial testimony, this schedule seems fairly accurate. However, don't shoot the messenger. I'm fully aware that Dr. Murray isn't exactly the most reliable source, but one thing is certain. Michael was under immense pressure from AEG to attend rehearsals, and if anyone was going to know about that, it would have been Dr. Murray, since he was hearing about it firsthand from AEG. Now let's take a look at the itinerary. It reads, 1:30 p.m. MJ arrives at the Forum. 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. MJ and Travis dance. 2 p.m. to 4:30 the dancers dance in the dance room. 4 o'clock, the band and the singers arrive. 4 p.m. to 4:30 p.m., MJ and Kenny Ortega have a meeting. 4:30 to 5:30 is lunch. 4:30 to 5 o'clock is MJ's lunch. 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. is MJ and the vocal coach. 5:30 to 6 p.m. there's dancer notes and fixes. And 6 p.m. to an open ending, MJ and the full company on stage for rehearsal. And the rehearsals did go pretty late, with him getting home after midnight into the wee hours of the morning. Dr. Murray stated that he changed the schedule. Okay. Instead of going to the Forum and spending all day, I told the two AEG execs, Randy and Paul I presume, Michael will get up early around 11 a.m., sit and have lunch with his kids, then Travis, the so-called shadow, Jackson's stand-in on stage, will come to the house and work with him in the mirror. Then, around 5 p.m., Michael will go to the Forum, refreshed, and work through rehearsals. With this new schedule, rehearsals would pretty much be split. In the mornings, MJ would train with Lou Ferrigno, then immediately rehearse with Travis for about 3 to 4 hours at his home, with a 10-minute break approximately, according to Travis's AEG trial testimony. Then, later in the evening, he would rehearse again with Kenny and the dancers at the Forum. Travis said he was scheduled to rehearse with Michael 5 days a week.
We would work, get there and like in the afternoon, and prior, Michael would be working with Lou Ferrigno on endurance training and some weight training. And I thought that was amazing, seeing the Incredible Hulk training Michael. It was awesome. So they would work out before me getting there. And then when I arrived, we would review whatever dance piece was coming up or whatever dance piece we were choreographing. We would jump around. So we do some preparation for the evening session, where we go to the venue and work with Kenny and the dancers in the band and all of the other staff of the team. Our days would sort of start small, just sitting on the floor, going through a game plan. We'd get up, we'd work on drill most days, we'd work on Smooth Criminal, we'd work on Dangerous at some point, we'd listen to music, we would watch the news, we would brainstorm and workshop and review in preparation for the next group rehearsal.
By the time rehearsals shifted to the Forum, Michael's absences had become a daily occurrence. Part of this was because he was working on the Dome project at Culver Studios in early June, and part of it was probably just exhaustion. His private rehearsals with Travis at home were fine in the beginning of production, but as the show ramped up, both Kenny and AEG grew concerned. They felt Michael wasn't fully grasping the material, and there simply wasn't enough time for him to rehearse with the dancers. On top of that, Michael's goal was to sing live and dance for these shows, and he hadn't quite mastered balancing both. So tensions were high. In Travis's AEG trial testimony, he stated that he didn't know why Michael wasn't showing up for rehearsals and that he hadn't asked. He also said that when he did see Michael, he just seemed busy with his work. After all, Michael wasn't just working, with the crew and production on This Is It. He was also working on an album and a book at the same time. Apparently, Michael explained to Travis that he was having trouble sleeping, but that he was still excited about touring. Travis never seemed to question him, as he felt like Michael had always been honest with him and gave him no reason to doubt that. However, Travis did note that some days were better than others when it came to Michael's productivity and energy levels. He even recalled one day near the end where Michael was cold and needed a blanket and a heater to be comfortable. Travis figured it was either because Michael was frustrated and feeling on edge from wanting to get everything perfect, or maybe he was just fighting a cold.
So at what point did people start to notice a decline in Michael's health?
We were around Father's Day at some point, and I think it started around maybe shortly after that. Like, it wasn't a big thing, but there were times when Michael would be cold and we didn't understand why. Or when I asked him about his weight, he said, "I'm getting to my fighting weight." And I said, "Okay, are you trying to be a supermodel?" He said, "No, I'm just getting to my fighting weight." So that made sense to me, given the $1 million that we spent on wardrobe and him wanting to look his best. Had no reason to not believe him. We did not have any idea of the gravity of the situation. And I think that's where Kenny's concern was coming from, is that we didn't realize what was happening. We just knew something was afoot.
My issue with Travis is that his answers to these questions have always felt very safe and political. He tends to stick to this specific script whenever he talks about certain things, particularly troublesome events in Michael's life, like the ending of the Dangerous tour where MJ went into rehab, and of course anything This Is It related. He continues to maintain that Michael seemed fine. He just wasn't privy to what MJ was doing with Dr. Murray. And while I don't think that's totally false, after all, a lot of people weren't privy to what was going on as far as propofol, it's clear that something was wrong with Michael. For Travis to keep saying he believed Michael could do all 50 shows and was fine, just in preparation, that feels like a deliberate deflection.
I did not drive no getaway car. I'm legally blind.
As a matter of fact, Karen Faye actually once voiced concerns to Travis about MJ's condition, and he told homegirl to hit the bricks. Okay, he didn't say that. Please don't sue me. He pretty much said, yes, she was concerned. She came to me in an aggressive way. I told her, anything you want to voice, to say, talk to Kenny. I said to her, because we were in the middle of rehearsal, I told her, if you feel it's serious, then converse with Kenny. She wanted to call a doctor. There was a doctor already there. I'm a creative person. I was working on the show, which I had been hired to focus on. On the one hand, I understand that Karen, allegedly, came at him aggressively, and Travis was the choreographer, so in the grand scheme of things, what could he have done? It would have made more sense for her to take something like that to Kenny. On the other hand, I also feel like this was Travis trying to stay out of what he probably viewed as drama, given the source it came from. But that disinterest he expressed, saying, I'm a creative person, I was working on the show which I had been hired to focus on. Yeah, that's kind of nasty work, Chief. I ain't gonna cap. You're not beating the turncoat allegations.
And when Michael was looking concerning during the prep, did the close collaborators like you and Kenny and even Karen Faye and people like that, did you guys have meetings where you were discussing together concern?
I don't think that there was ever any gigantic group meetings. People, everybody would come talk to Kenny, and we would sometimes have conversation among ourselves, but that was, very much it. No one knew the extent. I was not privy to the extent of what was going on. Bush and Karen had a different relationship with Michael that preceded mine. They probably would have more intimate conversations with him about certain topics that Michael and I wouldn't have. So their relationship with him was different. So I can't speak to what their experiences were, but mine never gave me the amount of alarm that I imagined that he would die.
He does have a point when he says that Bush and Karen had a different relationship with Michael that preceded his. Maybe Travis would have considered it out of line to accuse Michael of X, Y, and Z when it came to his health and how he was taking care of himself. But once again, something was going on with Michael, and everyone knew it, including and especially Travis. But just like Kenny Ortega, he took the road of spreading the MJ This Is It gospel in the media after his death. You know, that Michael was fine, engaging in creative jousting, and healthy.
Do you think now, in retrospect, that Michael would have been able to do 50 shows in London?
Yes, definitely believe that Michael would have been able to do the shows. He wanted this.
Do you think he was ready for the 50 concerts?
I absolutely think Michael was ready for the 50 concerts
and more. Do you think Michael was ready?
I do. I really do.
And as I said with Kenny, I don't really expect Travis to put the full truth out there, especially when he was promoting the film at the time and trying to keep Michael's legacy intact as his friend. After all, admitting how frail Michael was doesn't exactly fit the narrative they were pushing. But like Charles Thompson said toward the end of that Travis Payne MJ cast episode, it became sticky when members of the Jackson family at the time were actively trying to find truth and justice.
No, and I think Travis himself has a bit of a mixed legacy in the community in that he obviously was very involved with Michael and very instrumental in bringing a lot of great choreography to fruition. But, there's always going to be that lingering thought in the back of your head that, he didn't raise alarm bells to the same level that Karen and Kenny did. And then beyond This Is It, between Michael's death and then the movie coming out, he was in the media talking about how great Michael was and all of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I understand it in a way because, if this is your friend and you want to preserve their legacy, I can totally understand how you would think that it was the right thing to do. The point at which it becomes questionable is if you have a family that's trying to find the truth and your attempts to preserve your friend's legacy end up hampering the family in their quest for truth and justice.
Which brings me to my final point I'd like to bring up when it comes to Travis and the This Is It rehearsals, the claims made in Jermaine Jackson's book. I've used Jermaine Jackson's book, You Are Not Alone, Michael Through a Brother's Eyes, as source material throughout this entire series so far. He's given some really valuable insight into what was actually going on behind the scenes of This Is It, things that AEG clearly didn't want the public to see or know about. So I'm going to read a few excerpts of Jermaine's book about the rehearsals, and then we'll hear what Travis had to say about it. It was when Michael was at the forum on June 17th that someone mentioned the noticeable deterioration in how he looked when he took the stage. That's not Michael up there. He's like a ghost. You seen how skinny he's getting? In the routine for Thriller, he turned left when he knew to turn right. That was odd in and of itself, but he did it a second time. He also started repeating himself, a sentence or a phrase like someone with obsessive compulsive disorder. But he didn't have OCD. He struggled to finish one song, and he sometimes needed a teleprompter for lyrics. Plus, he had to be helped up and down ramps and flights of stairs. This weakness was also apparent in the Thriller routine when he was supposed to come out from beneath a giant bug, which was made featherweight for him, but he couldn't push it up without assistance. Certainly, no one was giving Michael the kid glove treatment. Instead, I know that he felt belittled on several occasions, and he was also yelled at, as witnessed by people there. On one occasion, he deliberately spoke into his mic one day as he walked off stage and muttered, "I just want someone to be nice to me today." And a voice from the floor yelled back, "If we could just have a coherent person here today." "They wouldn't speak to me like that if Joseph was here," Michael muttered off mic. Michael hated the way that he was spoken to at times. Here's what Travis had to say specifically and pertains to the "if we could just have a coherent person here today."
I don't know that to have happened. Everyone was always nice to Michael Jackson. It was impossible not to be. And certainly no one would disrespect him that way out loud in public. And I know that as a performer, as a dancer, especially one who had not been on stage in almost 2 decades and at 5 decades old, yes, sometimes mistakes were made. Yes, sometimes we need to start the song over. But that's what rehearsal was for. Mm-hmm. So if not in our rehearsals, that certainly couldn't happen in a concert. So anything and anybody who goes through a creative process understands that it takes weeks and weeks and weeks to master anything, let alone at the level in which Michael Jackson had always created. And it was his process that he was in control of that we were there to support. So I can only say that that's why we were rehearsing.
I've read an interview with you once. You gave it in 2009 to a fan site called The Final Curtain, where you said in it, quote, "Michael was definitely ready to do the concerts." In hindsight, with everything we know that was going on, do you personally wish, like Kenny and Karen, that you'd pushed harder and raised alarm bells louder?
I don't know, because understanding that Michael Jackson was the orchestrator, he was the architect, and he was the boss of this entire experience. We are there to support his vision, not to order him or demand of him or do anything but absolutely support his vision. And that was my lane, and I was happy in it. So if I had the information that I have now, sure. But I didn't even know what propofol was until 2009. So there is no way that anybody could have foreseen, because we don't have the intimate sort of knowledge of his day-to-day life. That's not our job. And I think Michael appreciated our respecting his privacy.
2 things. Number 1, Travis said, "I don't know that to have happened. Everyone was always nice to Michael Jackson. It was impossible not to be." I don't doubt that Travis may not have known about this specific situation. What I do doubt is that everyone was always nice to Michael Jackson. I mean, since we're talking about what Jermaine alleged in his book, let's get serious. Did y'all see what I did there? Jermaine Jackson, let's get serious. But let's not act like Jermaine Jackson don't have. Jermaine Jackson has hits. Is it? This isn't the video for that. Let me stop. Michael wasn't showing up to rehearsals and no one knew why. And when he did show up, he wasn't himself. And people were frustrated with him as a result. It's all over the emails from Kenny Ortega, Travis, Randy Phillips, everyone. There are multiple emails discussing whether they should pull the plug on the concerts, talking about giving him the tough love, now or never card. You can't tell me that these people were all being nice to Michael Jackson in those moments. Even Randy Phillips admitted that amongst himself, Kenny, Travis, and Michael Bearden, who we'll get to later, they were the 4 people who spent the most time with MJ in his final months, and that meant conceiving, putting things together, fighting, loving, hugging, or should we just call it creative jousting? And don't even get me started again on those foul emails Randy would send, jokes about having to put Michael's nose on, or the emails from Ted Fiker and Sean Trell calling MJ a freak hours before he had to sign his AEG contract. These people didn't give a shit about Michael. They watched him deteriorate before their very eyes. So no, I don't think they would have hesitated to make an off-the-wall comment like that. And I do think someone would disrespect him like that out loud in public because they had no problems doing it in private. Number 2, Travis also said, "We are there to support his vision, not to order him or demand of him or do anything but absolutely support his vision." And that was my lane, and I was happy in it. That quote pretty much sums up everything I've said here. Travis chose to stay in his lane, to enjoy his time and his work with Michael on this show that was supposed to be his last. He didn't seem to want to get caught up in anything else that would distract him from executing him and Michael's vision. To be fair, Travis wasn't the only one who kept things surface level. It's a pattern we've seen before, where everyone plays their part but no one steps up when the person in the center is struggling. As MJ once said, how many times can we turn our heads and pretend that we cannot see? Travis Payne, sashay away. Let's cast our final member of Team MJ, the woman in charge of making him look good, Michael Jackson's hair and makeup artist, Karen Faye.
To be honest, they just all up in it. Let the man be. They ran my brother crazy. Really. It was too much. They just didn't leave him alone.
The floor's all wet over there, okay?
What makes it great?
Floor's all wet.
What makes it great?
What makes it great?
What will make it great?
No, it looks good. It's really good.
I don't want good.
Well, maybe if we get another person.
Come on, move up.
As a friend of mine would say, Karen Faye is one of those people. One of those people we don't deserve, but we got.
If you're talking about Karen Faye, we've heard similar stories from many people.
It was a very big problem for me. She did things that weren't nice. And to this day, she still does stuff.
Like what?
Oh, like if she would have her book me a hotel, she put me in some hotel that wasn't even finished, and just things she would do. She would make up stories about me, and as we go further, I can tell you a little bit about stuff she did, because it got to a point I quit. Because there were things I could do that, Karen thought she could do with the hair, and I can even look at stuff and tell you where my work is and where hers is. And I could do things that she couldn't do. Like when he wanted longer hair, I would add and make my own extensions on his head. Just a lot of things I could do. And I think he just enjoyed me, because I'm just a different person. I'm not hung up on who somebody is. If I like you, I like you. And I just think that was a lot of why even Terry Anderson talks about how excited he'd get whenever I was coming somewhere. But that's further down. But I just think he liked me, and I think sometimes people get jealous.
Now, I've mentioned Karen a lot throughout this series, and that's because she played a significant role in Michael's life, whether we like it or not. There were times she was fired, times she was rehired, and plenty of moments where her trigger fingers turned to Twitter fingers. To me personally, she's made it seem like she's the self-proclaimed Michael Jackson whisperer. Plus, didn't this woman admit to owning a pair of MJ's underwear? Yeah, you could have kept that one in the draft, sis. Aside from all of that, when it came to calling out what was really going on with Michael during the lead up to This Is It, she stood on business, as the kids say.
You're not getting it. It's not clocking to you. It's not clocking to you that I'm standing on business, is it?
So let's buckle the fuckle up as we dive into the lore of Karen Faye. Karen Faye is a hair and makeup artist who has worked in television and videos. Prior to meeting Michael, her clients included names like Kevin Costner and Smokey Robinson. She met MJ in 1982 when she did his hair and makeup for the Thriller album cover.
So I want to get like a glistening quality to it, you know, where we can keep like small drops of water, like playing, you know what I mean?
This is what you use. Do you use this before you use the Carlac Bear? It's water. It's just water.
Why does Michael always look so annoyed with this woman, bro? Anyway, the gag is, she flashed him that first time she met him.
In fact, a little known fact, you flashed him that first day.
Oh, okay. I undid the top of my jeans and I just flashed him the top because I happened to have worn some tiger underwear that day. And he went, ah! And he was just so embarrassed by that. And I quickly buttoned it up, but I think that's why he called me back the next job.
You think?
I think so.
He liked people who had a sense of humor.
Yes, absolutely.
Child. Anyway, so...
After that initial meeting, she would go on to work with MJ for 27 years. She traveled with him on all 3 of his world tours. Only the first half of the history tour though, because, well, there's tea there. Should I clock? Yeah, I got time. What else y'all finna do? Okay, so basically what had happened was, according to Karen, during the history tour, Michael's manager at the time, Tariq Ben Ammar, by this point MJ had a lot of the Nation of Islam folks in his business, but that's another story, wasn't paying Karen properly. He allegedly told her she could still work with Michael, but couldn't speak to him. On top of that, Debbie Rowe, MJ's wife at the time, was supposedly involved in that decision and allegedly jealous of the close bond Karen and Michael had. Karen claims Tariq lowered her salary and again emphasized that she wasn't allowed to speak to Michael. And she told the brother to go F-U-C-K himself. And he told her to hit the pavement. She later said that Michael had to go along with it because he was under the control of the people handling his money. According to her, she was eventually asked to return after her replacement allegedly stole from Michael and started spreading rumors about him. However, it's also been alleged that the real reason she was fired was because people thought she was making it difficult for them to do their jobs. And it kinda checks out. Homegirl didn't know how to stay out of grown folks' business. And as much as I love third-degree wig snatching Miss Faye, let's get back on track, darling. Outside of Michael's tours, Karen also worked with him on major projects like the 1993 Super Bowl halftime show, the canceled 1995 HBO One Night Only special, and the 2001 30th anniversary concert. She met countless dignitaries alongside with Michael like Princess Diana, President Clinton, and officials all over Europe and Asia. Their connection extended beyond just professional settings too. She would visit Neverland and even had her wedding shower there. Wait, isn't Karen Faye divorced? Of course, I can't forget to mention her being around during the 2005 trial. And despite all the shade I've thrown at her, I'll give her this. I'm grateful that Michael had a familiar face around during that time. Someone who knew him, knew he was innocent, and didn't treat him like a criminal. Throughout those 4 years, from 2005 to early 2009, MJ didn't really keep in touch with Karen that much. During her AEG trial testimony, she estimated that they spoke maybe every 3 to 5 months. Other than that, she stated she wasn't really keeping up with him outside of what she saw in newspapers and the media. Then one day, while he was still living in Las Vegas, I'm guesstimating this was sometime in 2008, he apparently called her. To quote her testimony, he called me, I think from Las Vegas, and said, "We have some projects I want you to be involved in and stuff." And I said, "Great, just give me a call when you're ready," kind of thing. She said she found out that This Is It tour was happening on the news when MJ announced the concerts at the infamous March 5th press conference. Per her trial testimony, I remember seeing the media bus thing where the media was flying over his bus. I don't think think I actually saw the announcement live. I saw it in retrospect, in it being played on the news and things like that. But I don't think I saw it at the time. I saw the helicopters, you know, and the buses and all of the expectation of Michael going to do it, but I think maybe I had to work and couldn't watch the rest of it, so I really can't be sure that I saw it at the time that it was happening. When asked if she was concerned when she saw MJ on the news during this time after 4 years of not seeing him, she said, "No, I just thought he had a really bad hairpiece on, sir. But I have to explain that that's what I do, so those are the things that I notice about everybody, like their personal appearance, their hair, their makeup, and, you know, it's just an unconscious thing. I'll go to a restaurant and say, oh, I wouldn't wear my eye makeup like that, and I just noticed his wig was so big. So that was what I noticed most of all, and I thought his behavior was a little odd, but not out of the ordinary." Shut up, Karen. A few weeks after the press conference, around mid to late March, she would receive a phone call from MJ's personal assistant, Michael Amir. The very first person to give me a call was Michael Amir, and he identified himself as Michael's rep and said that Michael wanted to speak to me and if I'd be available to talk to him. Sometime after that, she said Michael called her and their conversation went like this. Okay, I was lying in my bed and the blocked call came in and I said, that's probably Michael. It was, you know, it was really happy and light, and it was like, oh my gosh, I see you're doing a concert, you know, and he goes, yeah. And he used to always use the phrase, work with me, Turkle, you know, because he's saying like, I want to work with you, and like when I'm doing his makeup, it was, work with me, Turkle. He said that to me, work with me, Turkle, so it was just fun, and we kind of laughed and chuckled. Interesting little fun fact is that Dr. Neil Ratner said the same thing in his book, that MJ always used to say to him, work with me, Rat, work with me. And I find it very quaint that was, you know, one of his little Michael Jacksonisms. I'm sorry, I literally love this man so much. Oh my god, okay, bye. I mentioned during that conversation I was really excited for him. I said, I see you're doing a lot of shows, and he said, yeah. He goes, I thought I was only going to do 10, you know, I don't know how I woke up and now I'm doing 50. I said, well then, you know, that's a lot, and he was kind of a little discouraged about the number, and I was a little apprehensive about it too, but I mean, we didn't dwell on that whatsoever. You know, he was like, yeah, we gotta do this. I said, we gotta get your hair together, and we got to start working really fast, you know? He goes, okay, and that was about it. We were just bantering back and forth because it was nice to hear his voice, of course. After that conversation with MJ, Karen of course agreed to join the tour. She claims after that she went online to look at the tour dates and immediately became concerned with the number of shows and how the schedule was created. I went online to the website and I viewed his schedule that they had for him, and upon looking at that, I was like, he can't do this. The shows are far too close together, and I know that he needs more time to recuperate in between shows, and with that schedule, he may last a week. I was really concerned with that. Michael has a lot of adrenaline, and what it takes for him to do a show physically and emotionally and mentally to be able to perform with the effort it took, what he himself put into a show, he needed that time between shows. He needed more time to rest and sleep for him to be healthy, for him to maintain any kind of longevity. She was so concerned, in fact, that she called Kenny Ortega. I think I might have said something like, he might make the first week, but it was going to go downhill after that, you know? I felt the schedule was too difficult for him to maintain. Back in part 2, I did reference a set of emails from Randy Phillips and Paul Gongaware dated March 25th, 2009, where Randy said, we need to pull the plug now, I will explain. Paul had denied in his testimony that the email was in reference to calling off the tour, but said it had to do with pulling the plug on Karen Faye, who, as we're discussing, was expressing fears about Michael's ability to do these shows. Paul said Kenny Ortega felt like Karen would try to control access to Michael, and he didn't like that. After Kenny's talk with Karen, he had sent an email to Paul Gongaware and production director Bugsy Hogdahl. Karen Faye called to check in and confirmed that MJ had reached out to her regarding the show. She was thrilled that we would all be working together again and would make herself available to me to discuss the show plan at any time. She also mentioned that she read online that tickets were being sold for every other day. It's her strong opinion that this is dangerous and impractical with consideration to MJ's health and ability to perform. In the past 10 to 12 years ago, Karen would often speak on his, Michael's, behalf with these kinds of issues. Okay, Kenneth, business professionally clock her tea. Because it's like I said earlier, Karen does seem to try to be the Michael Jackson whisperer. And the fact that I'm currently discussing March means we've barely entered the plot, and everyone is already not with the sugar honey iced tea when it comes to Miss Faye, which I think speaks volumes. But as if contacting Kenny wasn't enough, she also talked to Michael about it. I think he didn't know how the schedule was. Then I said it would be really smart that he should go and look at the schedule and see, you know, how it's scheduled and how he feels about it. And if he was feeling uncomfortable about it, he should say something about it, and his response was, "That's funny, my mother said the same thing." By the conversation I had with him, he didn't seem like he knew how many days and how it was structured, that he just had to do 50 dates. He didn't seem to be aware when I told him that. "Have you seen the schedule? You should see it." And he goes, "No, I haven't." And I just wanted to make sure that he knew how it was scheduled to see if he was comfortable with it. As much as I hate to say it, I agree with Karen here. I don't think Michael was aware of how the shows were structured at this point. He just knew it had blown up to 50 fairly quickly, and once MJ found out about the schedule, he wasn't happy, which he stated with the group of fans on May 29th at Center Staging, as Talitha Linehand said in her book. "They did the schedule wrong too," said Michael. "It was supposed to be day, show off, day, show off, day, show off." He'd obviously meant to say show, day off, show, day off, show, day off. But of course, we understood his meaning. I believe that AEG structured the shows that way, as Paul Goncourt would tell his secretary in an email to design a calendar for MJ using light tan colors for show dates, while drawing attention to his rest days, in which he stated, "Don't want the shows to stand out too much when Michael looks at it. Less contrast between work and off. Maybe off days in a contrasting soft color. Put off in each day after July 8th as well. Figure it out so it looks like he's not working too much." So you know what? In reference to that, pop off, Karen, because I don't think we realize how little control MJ actually had. Now before we continue with Karen Faye, let's take a quick little segue to talk about Michael's longtime costume designers, Michael Bush and Dennis Tompkins. Bush and Tompkins began collaborating with Michael in 1985 during the filming of Captain EO. Both started off working at ABC Television, where Bush worked on a bunch of different jobs on an as-needed basis. Tompkins, on the other hand, had already worked with some old Hollywood icons like Milton Berle and George Burns. It was actually Tompkins who got the gig for Captain EO and brought Bush on as one of the sewers. These two would go on to create some of Michael's most iconic looks. Now, I ain't got nothing bad to say about Dennis Tompkins. He never seemed like someone chasing the spotlight, and he sadly passed away in December of 2011. However, Michael Bush, please step to the front of the class and explain to everyone how you were able to auction off signed Michael Jackson merch that was not manufactured until after his death. Answer me quickly.
While I'm waiting for your fucking response, are you just not gonna say anything, dumbass?
That's right. Michael Bush auctioned a standee signed by MJ, but the gag is merchandise licensee Bravado confirmed that the standee was not manufactured until after MJ's death. So how did MJ sign it? Shout out to Damian Shields, and remember to stream Faking Michael Besties. In his book, The King of Style, Dressing Michael Jackson, Bush recalls the moment he was asked to be a part of This Is It. It wasn't until 2009 that we received a call in Michael's cryptic tradition. On the other end of the line, a simple voice stated, "Michael's going back on tour, come out, he needs you." Our initial meeting at Center Staging in Burbank for This Is It was the first time I had laid eyes on Michael in 4 years, and when he entered the room wearing his Michael uniform, a fedora hat, and sunglasses, Michael zeroed in on me, walked right over, held my hands, and bowed. He took off his glasses, which signaled to me that there were no barriers between us, even though we had gone several years without seeing each other. He had that twinkle in his eye, the one that said, "Fasten your seatbelt." And it was like no time had passed. We picked up our familiar pace like the old days, except our timeline to get everything done was supersonic, the shortest we were ever given in the 4 tours we did with Michael. It was May, and the tour's promoter wanted everything ready by July. We had 2 months to make it all come together. Although Bush initially seemed excited for his next adventure with Michael Jackson, he soon started to realize that everything was not as it seemed.
He was like bone thin, and he grabbed me on the arm and say, "You promised me you wouldn't tell."
Tell what?
What I'm seeing. There was just these telltale signs. When is someone going to pay attention? Because to me it was blatant.
What was blatant?
The way he was like on stage rehearsing.
What was different about it?
A lot of start-stops. Usually when we did a music video with Michael, they'd load the camera full of film, they would run it until it ran out. You didn't do 2 bars of the song and stop. That was Michael's energy. He fed off of what was going on.
He didn't have his usual stamina.
No, and then you start speaking up, like you said, to the powers that be, and it just seemed like it was falling on deaf ears, or we'll fix that later, or there's more, something else that seemed like it was more important.
Bush, Tompkins, and Karen had arguably worked with Michael longer than anyone else on the This Is It team we've discussed, so they knew what he looked like at his peak, and what it looked like when he was silently screaming, crying, and throwing up. I assume Bush was telling Karen everything he noticed, and she was the one taking it to whoever might listen. Kenny Ortega, Randy Phillips, Travis Payne. It's a real pity Bush eventually got real real chummy with John Branca, the current co-executor of the Michael Jackson estate, that MJ fired twice, mind you. And Karen's reputation for being a lot, I really had to restrain myself there, it kind of worked against her. People didn't want to take her seriously, even when she was trying to sound the alarm about MJ's health. But let's be clear, when it comes to Karen, not everything is so black or white.
Black or white.
There were moments she slipped and said things that hinted at a deeper resentment or frustration with Michael. If anything, Kenny Ortega was the one who started speaking up for him before she did, and that, my friends, is the tea. Let's get back to Karen. In the beginning, when Karen was officially hired in April 2009 and saw MJ for the first time in a while, she thought he looked great, very happy, healthy, and clear. She said he was on the thinner side, but figured he still had time to bulk up. But as time went on, she said things started to look grim. According to her trial testimony, the first time he actually got on stage, I saw the change in him. At first, rehearsals were just about meetings and collaborations, things like colors, lighting, stage positions, a lot of production meetings. But as soon as he had to go on stage and actually rehearse, I saw the change in him. He was getting thinner and thinner every month. He was repeating himself a lot, saying the same things over and over again. The turning point happened when he got on stage. For instance, before he'd get on the stage of a scene, she's referring to the beginning of June 2009 when the 3D stuff for This Is It was being filmed at Culver Studios, he would say, "Make sure you stand where I can see you." And he would say it repeatedly. Let's be honest. Most of Karen Faye's AEG trial testimony leans heavily on things she overheard, saw in passing, or maybe even assumed. It's rarely rooted in solid fact. It's always, I heard a phone call. Michael's fans told me. Kenny said. So while it isn't the most concrete testimony, let's BFFA. When it comes to Michael Jackson, and especially anything after his death, is anything ever fully reliable? Now, Karen may have officially been hired in April, but she wasn't around all the time during April and May since most of the early rehearsals were focused on production meetings. She spent a lot of that time prepping things for MJ, making wigs, taking measurements of his head, stuff like that. And if that's the case, shout out to homegirl for getting our mans back in those 1B 16-inch Brazilian water wave bundles because, baby, I love seeing my man in those silky swoopy swoops. But I also love to see them go. Per her trial testimony, I would go there, kind of prep Michael's hair a little bit, we would have some meetings. I was still doing other jobs at the very beginning because nothing was really solidified. Nobody was giving me a schedule of what I was supposed to do. I was researching all the adhesives that were available. I was figuring out ways to do my job and make it successful. I was doing a lot of that work, and they would call me and say, Michael is here and he's asking for you. So I would have to go to center staging when he requested me. I went to a few production meetings, things like that. So seemingly, most of Karen's recollections come from late May and early June, specifically her encounters with Michael at center staging and onward. Plus, it was around this time that everyone started to visibly notice the changes in him, which frustrated Karen to no end because she felt like no one was listening to her when she raised alarm bells about it. She took it upon herself to express her concerns to seemingly anyone who would listen. First, starting with Kenny Ortega, who she claimed told her that in regards to Michael's psychological well-being that Randy Phillips had hired the top 10 doctors in the country for Michael. Despite that, she continued to have concerns because he was cold. She said his body was cold to touch and he was repeating himself a lot. She stated he kept repeating, "Why can't I choose?" and that it was one of the things he repeated over and over again. From there, she stated that Kenny told her to take her concerns to Randy Phillips. Randy, along with other AEG executives, allegedly seemed convinced that the reason Michael's condition was declining was because he was doing something to himself, or as he stated in emails to his colleagues, a doctor was shooting him up with something and they were scared to death. Because of that, Karen Faye's concerns basically fell on deaf ears. I ran into Randy in the hallway and everybody was sad about Michael missing rehearsal. He said, "Yeah, this is bad. It's not so good. I had to scrape Michael off the floor in London to get him to the announcement because he was so drunk." Karen claimed that both Randy and Kenny insisted Michael rehearse and forced him on stage. She also claimed that she was told not to listen to anything MJ said and only take instruction from Randy. She had even tried her hand at talking to Paul Gongaware, recalling a phone conversation where he was on the line with MJ's security. Michael had apparently locked himself in the bathroom at his home and was refusing to leave for rehearsals. She said Paul sounded angry and kind of desperate to get Michael here. What I did see and experience because I went to Paul Gongaware's office, he was on the phone with one of Michael's security guards saying, "You have to get him out of the bathroom. He's locked himself in the bathroom. Do you have a key? Do whatever it takes." It was around this time that Karen claims Kenny Ortega instructed her to take her concerns directly to Michael's manager, Frank Frank DeLeo. But according to her, he didn't seem too concerned either. As a matter of fact, his response to her claims was so cold, just recollecting it made Karen cry on the witness stand. She stated she overheard him talking with someone about how thin Michael was, and his response was simply get him a bucket of chicken. Karen stated she communicated with DeLeo via phone and email, but to my knowledge, there are no records of any emails to him until just 3 days before Michael's death. She said she sent multiple emails expressing serious concerns, even saying she feared Michael would get so sick he could die. One of those was the now infamous June 22, 2009 email in which she claimed Michael was playing the victim. But before we read that, let's look at what Karen had to say about the email during her trial testimony. I was desperate when I wrote this email because I felt that I wasn't being heard or considered, and I really wanted to get attention from the people above the line because I felt I wasn't being heard or acknowledged. So I composed a letter, almost in their language, to get their attention, to make them feel that they could be responsible if they didn't do something. That was my intent with this, to use language that would get their attention. Frank DeLeo told me I was not allowed to communicate with the fans. Now let's clock that tea. Hi Tukey, Frank DeLeo's nickname. I just want you to have this information to be one step ahead. Michael is showing and telling his fans of his fragile state and his inability to do 50 shows. It seems like he is setting himself up to be the victim. I see his pattern once again emerging with his caretakers. He uses them to finance his life, and then moves on when he cannot deliver on his promises. I am not saying his original intent isn't to fulfill his obligations, but I am merely speculating that he becomes paralyzed with fear. This is why I thought therapy for him is the most important element to his being able to succeed. When he asked me to do this in May, and I met with him, I saw a slender but strong and coherent Michael Jackson. All this hurts me all the way around. I see so many people invest in his success and believe in him. Then I have to watch him self-destruct. I have seen with my own eyes him deteriorate physically in a month. I have seen him do this several times in my relationship with him. I watch him turn people against each other who are working so hard to help him. I want nothing more than to see him and his art continue to thrive and live on, not only for history and himself, but for his children's sake. He hurts himself most of all. I love and care about Michael like a brother, a family member, and I pray that you are correct when you say you have it under control and figured out. I trust you. I also care about you. I don't think you, Kenny, or Randy deserve becoming the villains or the financial victims. I think everyone deserves to have amazing success. We need to all be on the same page at all times. You do not want him to collapse in front of several 100,000 people. He has created many witnesses so far. Michael is painfully thin. His bones are protruding. I am the one person that has physical contact with him every day. Michael's OCD is getting worse. He repeats his actions and rambling words constantly, rarely coherent with the present conversation. I see Travis struggling and winded, just going through the motions at rehearsal, doing MJ's part. We are having Michael on a cherry picker out over the audience, climbing very high, steep steps. And so far, he cannot even walk down the ramp without assistance. Kenny has asked the female dancer to assist him as they leave the stage. This is between you and me alone. I am leaving this in your hands, as you have instructed me to do. I am getting many emails from fans similar to this one. He is delivering this message to the public himself. He also brought in several fans at Culver Studios, and they saw the bones protruding down his back when he tried on some clothing they gave him. It's no wonder Michael Jackson always looked like he couldn't stand this heifer. Let's take a second to actually unpack what she said, because she said a lot. Once again, in regards to that email, she claimed her intent was to get the attention of the people in charge, since in her words, she wasn't being heard. Per her trial testimony, I was hoping to scare him enough that he would take action, sir, because he instructed me that I was supposed to come to him. I was hoping that by making this letter sound dire enough, he would actually take care of things, okay? And I knew Frank couldn't stop or postpone the concert. I was just trying to get their attention to do something. I was desperate, and I felt like I wasn't being listened to. I had wanted a therapist for Michael all along, but they kept telling me, oh, they have this doctor. At this point, this was the second letter I had written with no response. No response from Frank DeLeo, no response from anybody, and I was trying to get their attention with this, sir. So first, Karen said, I just want you to have this information to be one step ahead. It seems like he is setting himself up to be the victim. I see his pattern once again emerging with his caretakers. He uses them to finance his life and then moves on when he cannot deliver his promises. She said her reasoning for saying this was based on everything she saw after the 2005 trial, when MJ left the country and went to Bahrain. We went over this back in part 1, the 2C's Records debacle, where MJ and Prince Abdullah were supposed to collaborate on films, records, and making a book deal. In exchange, Prince Abdullah was fronting MJ's living expenses for him and his children, but nothing ever happened because MJ hee-heed into the wind, and as a result, Prince Abdullah ended up suing him, and some of MJ's This Is It advance money was used to pay him off. Next, she said, I see so many people invest in his success and believe in him, then I have to watch him self-destruct. I have seen with my own eyes him deteriorate physically in a month. I have seen him do this several times in my relationship with him. She gave the example of the canceled 1995 HBO special, One Night Only, where MJ had gone through rehearsals and seemed fine, but she claimed MJ had taken something that put him into an incoherent state when it came time to do the show. This is something that we also went over back in part 1, and it was pretty clear to me personally that MJ was exhausted and dehydrated. We did discuss his propofol treatments with Dr. Ratner, but I don't think he took anything, at least in this instance, to stop the show. I think his body just needed rest. Real rest, not propofol-induced rest. Continuing on, she said, I watch him turn people against each other who are working so hard to help him, per her trial testimony. For instance, when Michael was getting fitted, there was this designer Zaldi who was fitting his clothes. When Zaldi left and I went into the room, Michael Bush was there. Michael asked Michael Bush, I can't wear these clothes, they're not going to work for me, can you start working on other clothes? And Michael Bush said okay, but that wasn't what Michael Bush's job in This Is It was supposed to be. Michael never told anybody else. He didn't tell Zaldi he couldn't wear those clothes, so it created a conflict, you know? She also said, he hurts himself most of all. I don't think you, Kenny, or Randy deserve becoming the financial villains or financial victims. Now, the first part of that I agree with. Michael did truly hurt himself most of all, and as a result, he suffered the ultimate consequence since he's no longer here. But we're all our own worst critics, and after everything MJ went through, everything she saw him go through, it's hard to hear Karen say things like this and then fall back on the defense of trying to get the attention of the higher-ups. Behind every JK is a little bit of truth, so at least stand on business about what you said, Ms. Faye. Intentionally bashing someone you considered a close friend to men who clearly didn't care, no matter what you said, or to anyone you said it to, is nasty work. And to Frank DeLeo of all people, be for real. Karen was the main one talking about how MJ fired Frank DeLeo in the 80s for allegedly stealing from him, and how Michael didn't even want him back as his manager, but somehow it was cool for her to bash MJ to this man. Make it make sense, pesos to dollars. Like, how you gonna warn everybody about him and then turn around and spill everything to him when MJ's at his most vulnerable and have the audacity to say, this is between you and me alone. I'm leaving this in your hands as you have instructed me to do so. Answer me!
While I'm waiting for your fucking response, are you just not gonna say anything, dumbass?
And as for the second part, I think it's all subjective. In some aspects of the story, Frank DeLeo, Kenny Ortega, and Randy Phillips are the villains. Especially Randy. Like, I'm that man's biggest op, as the kids say. But at the same time, these men also gave Michael a chance. They said yes to the tour and yes to being in business with him, which means on some level, despite everything, they believed in him. All three of them had worked with MJ before. Granted, Randy not so much since the LA Gear deal kind of flopped and MJ said no to him in like 2007, but still, they weren't walking into this blind. They knew, at least to some degree, what they were signing up for. Randy had even said that people warned him not to do that.
It was a huge risk, and everybody warned me against doing it, okay, and that, you know, ultimately he would break my heart. It wouldn't happen. I heard everything. They ran a full gamut. And you know what? In life, you have a very few opportunities in a career to touch greatness, and I've said this before. And they asked me if I would do this again, given everything that has happened. And the answer is hell yes.
Despite that, he still said yes to helping Michael, even if it was for selfish reasons, like wanting to be the guy that brought the King of Pop back to the top. So I guess the risk didn't outweigh the benefits of being part of Michael Jackson's final tour for any of these men, right? I'd also like to add that I don't believe MJ's reputation for backing out of deals was done with malice. I believe it was done out of fear, which Karen Faye also stated in her trial testimony. I didn't feel that Michael had bad intentions with what he was doing. I just felt that he was scared to death. He was frightened at this point. Something similar had already happened when he ended up not fulfilling his obligations with the people in Bahrain, even though I felt they were genuinely trying to help him. I saw this pattern repeat itself with This Is It. I started seeing the same pattern again, and I became afraid that fear was driving his behavior. Michael always went in with really good intentions, and then something would happen. I was just trying to figure out what that something was, and I believed the best path forward for him was to receive psychological help for the pain he had suffered, physically and mentally, in the past. As I've done throughout every part of this series, I've reiterated that although Michael Jackson is my man, he was not a perfect man. He was deeply flawed. He had insecurities and bad days, just like all of us, and that's what makes us human. I know Michael was this larger-than-life figure, but he was also someone who had been through a hell of a lot in his 50 years. Not just the trials, but his childhood, his father, growing up under the microscope of fame. Those expectations take a serious toll on a person, and every time something happened, all he could do was try to rebuild. But you can't rebuild on a foundation that's already unsteady. So do I believe there were times he self-sabotaged out of fear? Yes, but that doesn't take away from the fact that he was under immense pressure, he was financially strapped, had 3 children to provide for, and deep down, he knew he didn't want to go back on tour just to fix everything. What MJ needed more than anything during this time was someone truly on his side, not someone pretending to be supportive, then turning around and bashing him to his manager to get their attention. These were bold and honestly shocking statements for Karen to make, especially considering she wasn't privy to everything going on or the full scope of the situation as much as she'd like to think that she was. Karen, if you see this bookie, you know what to do. Block me. We've casted our doctors, our chefs, personal trainer, security, and now Team MJ. But every production needs a soundtrack, so finally, let's cast the This Is It Band. Now, of course, we're not going to focus on all of the musicians. We're only going to highlight a select few. Let's start by introducing everyone. On guitar, we have Orianthi and Tommy Organ. On bass, Alex Al. On drums, Jonathan Sugarfoot Moffat. On keyboard and serving as musical director, we have Michael Bearden. Also on keys, Morris Mo Pleasure. On percussion, Bashiri Johnson, and on vocals, Judith Hill, Ken Stacy, Daryl Finnessy, and Dorian Hawley, who also served as the vocal director. In that list of musicians, you'll notice a few MJ tour staples are missing, those being Michael's longtime collaborator Brad Buxer, choreographer Lavelle Smith Jr., guitarist David Williams, music director Greg Phillinganes, and vocal director / assistant music director Kevin Dorsey. Back in part 2, we learned that David Williams passed away shortly after Michael announced the concerts due to a stroke. But why weren't Greg, Lavelle, Brad, or Kevin involved? One thing most of us know about Michael Jackson is that he was a perfectionist. So when he built a strong working relationship with someone, especially someone who understood how he wanted things, he was usually reluctant to switch it up. That's why you'll notice a lot of the same people coming back for each tour. So to see these key players left out, it's sus, as the kids say. So why wasn't Brad Buxer involved? Well, what a lot of people may not know about Brad is that outside of being a keyboardist and composer, he's an airline pilot. He details this in MJ Cast episode 100, the Brad Buxer special.
I went and got hired by an airlines, and I kept working with him through the beginning of 2008, but I was unwilling to quit the airlines because, quite frankly, if I quit the airlines, I was too old to ever, you can't quit an airline and ever get hired by another airline, especially when you're older, and I'm older. You know, I was 49. He begged me one night where me and Michael Prince we were staying in a casino hotel, and he was living at that rented place in North Las Vegas. And so I'm on the phone with him. It's 12:30 midnight. Michael Prince is right there. And for 20 minutes, he goes, I don't want to work with anybody but you. You have to quit the airline. You have to do this. And I'm looking at Michael Prince and I go, this is, so great and stuff. But I wasn't going to quit the airline. And so I didn't. For a couple months after that, when I wasn't flying, I was still commuting back and forth to Las Vegas and working on stuff with him. But he didn't like that he couldn't kind of have me full time the way he wanted.
In a way, were you relieved that you didn't get asked to work, or if you were asked to work on This Is It?
He begged me not to leave him because I wouldn't quit the airlines. He didn't ask me to do This Is It.
So Brad not being a part of This Is It was intentional. He felt like it was time to shift his focus since he was getting older and he probably needed that stability. Of course, this left Michael a little upset, but Brad's reasoning is totally valid. As for Greg, I haven't found anything that shows he was even asked to be involved in This Is It. I don't think there was any bad blood between him and Michael, especially since he went on to be part of several tribute projects after Michael's death, including serving as the musical director for the Cirque du Soleil show. According to his Wikipedia page, he was on tour full-time with the band Toto from about 2005 until the group went inactive in 2008. So that lines up with when the early talks of This Is It were starting to pop off, and he could have just been busy. Okay, so what about Lavelle? Lavelle was involved in the very beginning, but it seems like he was kind of replaced by Travis Payne, at least according to episode 19 of the MJ Cast, the Thriller Night Halloween special.
Mentioning This Is It, you were there before that even came to be. You were there way before. And what was your
more involvement with This Is It when it sort of progressed on?
Nah, nothing really. I mean, I was there at the house for a couple of times working with Michael, and then after that, nothing. It was out of my hands. It was over for me.
Michael didn't get to choose to work with you for that tour?
Well, he said that he'd see me in London, and we left it at that.
And then that's when Travis Payne sort of moved in.
Yeah, and then that's when everything, yeah.
It seems like Lavelle was ready to go, but for some reason he wasn't chosen to move forward. Did Michael decide not to have him as the choreographer, or was that AEG's decision?
I do know this. Michael wasn't happy with how they hired people, because he wanted people that he wanted to hire, and they hired who they wanted to hire to work with him, so I guess they wanted everyone to be loyal to them.
Way back in part 1, I mentioned Kevin Dorsey, who said he was heavily involved in This Is It at the beginning, even helping select the band, but was completely blindsided when he showed up to rehearsal one day and AEG Live co-CEO Paul Gongaware told him to get to step in.
Something that's a little surprising in hindsight for us fans is that you weren't actually involved in the This Is It rehearsals. Similarly, Brad, who you just mentioned, he wasn't there either as MD. That task was handed off to Michael Bearden. Lavelle Smith Jr., another close collaborator of Michael Jackson, was more or less replaced by Travis Payne. These changes in hindsight are a little bit alarming to fans. Were you in contact with Michael in the lead up to This Is It?
When you say it was a surprise to the fans, it was a surprise to us. We were in all of the meetings prior to rehearsals. I put together the This Is It band. Literally, the day of the first rehearsal, I came to the gate to come in to get started. I mean, like I said, I'd been in all the meetings with Kenny and added Tommy Organ. I'd done this, I'd done all that. Went to the gate to come in for rehearsal and was stopped by security. And I said, "What's going on?" And they said, "You're not on the list." I'm just like, whoa. Next thing I know, Paul Gongaware came out and said, Michael has decided to go in a different direction when it comes to the band. And I said, wow, okay. I called Evie over at MJ's office, and Evie said, "Kevin, where are you?" I said, "I'm at home." She said, "Why aren't you at rehearsal?" I said, "I was just told that Michael's decided to go a different direction." And she said, "He would never do that. He doesn't know this." And I said, "Well, that's what I was told."
It was a sudden thing. It wasn't like you didn't get the feeling in these later meetings like things are changing here. Kenny, Michael, they're not as engaged. They want to go somewhere else. It was a sudden, you walked into that arena thinking you were it.
Yeah. I had no other, nothing that ever gave me an inkling of that anything had changed or anything like that. I mean, all my papers, my notes, and all the phone calls with Kenny, the meeting with Kenny, like I said, I put the This Is It band together.
Is there validity to Kevin's claims? Personally, I believe so. It seems like AEG was doing everything they could to, allegedly, hire their people and push Michael's out. Sure, people like Kenny and Travis were allowed to be part of the production, even though neither had worked on a tour with him since Dangerous. Well, technically Kenny worked on design aspects of Dangerous History and MJ and Friends, but he wasn't around for the whole tour, obviously. But as we went over, at some point they got real complacent when it came to the truth about Michael's health. It's also been alleged that Paul Gongaware was the one who told MJ's security to keep him on lockdown. The more they could separate Michael from outside people, the more they could allegedly control him. Jermaine Jackson discusses this in his book. One potential problem with Michael was that only a handful of people were used to recently working with him, and I suspect there was little familiarity with his character in certain ways. That probably had something to do with the fact that AEG had seemed intent on bringing in some of its own people. Director Kenny Ortega hadn't worked with my brother in a long time. Musical director Michael Bearden was chosen over my brother's #1 preference, Greg Phillinganes, and choreographer Travis Payne, last worked during Dangerous, was left in charge when my brother's preferred choice, Lavelle Smith Jr., was dismissed. Meanwhile, I don't think AEG CEO Randy Phillips could have had any idea who or what he was dealing with except Michael Jackson. Outside the dressing room personnel, there was a sense of starting from scratch instead of trusting proven practices from the history tour. This was important to get the most boost from Michael and to alleviate some of the pressure he put on himself. He had always needed to feel comfortable with the setup around him and with those people understanding him and how he worked. On This Is It, he did not feel that on every level, especially with some of the art direction, costume choices, and the musical mixes coming back in his ears. As he confided in someone close to him after rehearsals, "Wait until I get to London. I'm changing everything. We're going to do things my way." I don't want to say that Michael Jackson had absolutely no control over who was hired. I mean, he was loosely involved in choosing the dancers in the new band, but several key people he toured with for decades were missing, and I genuinely believe he wanted them to be a part of the tour. If we refer back to Kevin Dorsey's episode on the MJ cast, he actually reaffirms that by mentioning a note Michael had left on his nightstand that said he wanted his band back.
And one thing I'll always take with me, they said there was a post-it on his nightstand that was found when he passed that said simply, "Get me my band back." You know, so you hear all of the rumors and the this, the that, and everything that were said, but I always say, my God, he said he'd never tour without David, and he didn't.
Although Greg, Lavelle, Brad, and Kevin weren't involved in This Is It, there were still a few familiar faces in the band, people who had worked with MJ before and knew his style. One of those people being Jonathan Sugarfoot Moffett.
And all they had to do was call us up, any one of us. Jonathan Michael, who knows us, pick up the phone, call me, call Jackie. Michael would be alive today because we would have went there and said, "Can't you see there's something wrong? What are y'all concerned about, the show? There won't be no show if he's not well."
Sugarfoot worked with Michael for over 30 years, first joining the Jacksons on the Destiny tour. He went on to play on both the Triumph and Victory tours as well. When it comes to MJ's solo work, he played drums on the History tour, the 30th anniversary special, and the 2001 United We Stand, What More Can I Give benefit concert. Outside of MJ and the Jacksons, he's also worked with legends like Madonna, Elton John, Stevie Wonder, and George Michael, to name a few. To say that Sugarfoot was a friend of MJ's would be an understatement. To him, they were like family. He would regularly hang out at Havenhurst and later Neverland. They sent each other holiday cards, and he even considered Miss Jackson his second mother. He was with MJ at rehearsals the night before he died. Saying all of this begs the question, though. Why didn't he say anything when he saw trouble? As Jermaine said, why weren't he or Jackie called when Michael was clearly in distress? Let's start at the beginning. Sugarfoot was called to work on This Is It in April 2009. At the time he was called, the band was still being put together. They were still auditioning people and didn't really have a full band until early May 2009. Because of that, he recalls everyone working really hard to pull everything together fairly quickly. When he first arrived, he stated that much like everyone else, the thing he immediately noticed was how thin Michael was. Per MJ Cast episode 61, the Jonathan Sugarfoot Moffett special.
He was so skinny and frail. I was scared. I mean, I really had genuine fury within me. That was the first day of rehearsal. I got there about, I think it was the 16th of April, and I was afraid, but I knew Michael was always thin, but he was painfully thin then. But I also, you got to remember, and I remember, he had just went through extraordinary ordeal in that courtroom with all that stuff that teared down spiritually, mentally, and physically. So I knew he was trying to come back from that, rebuild himself and his health and everything from that. You know, that was so destructive, you know. And I knew that maybe that was why, because I had heard in the press that he wasn't eating and he was having trouble like that, for things like that. So, but it shocked me to no end that my arms wrapped around him and touched my own shoulders, and I was like, oh my God.
Despite Michael's physique, as rehearsals went on, Sugarfoot stated that MJ seemed fine most of the time. But of course, he did seem tired. He just attributed Michael's tiredness to the fact that he was juggling so many responsibilities, meeting with accountants, lawyers, management, and handling different aspects of the production. On top of that, he was rehearsing with everyone at Center Staging and Staples, doing home practices with Travis Payne, and training with Lou Ferrigno. I guess you could say they had my man Michael... Don't say it, don't say it, don't say it. I guess you could say they had my man Michael working day and night.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks! Then he showed days like, and I said, nothing wrong with him. What am I worried about? He's killing it up there. He's tearing it up. But, you know, I said the tiredness, I thought, came from, you know, all of those meetings he has to have. I just get there. You know, I drive him home. I wait until the time last minute before it's the time for me to show up at the rehearsal. I drive him home, go right there in the time to rehearsal. That's all I got to do. Finish rehearsals, drive home. He had to be there early in the morning, do different things, meetings, all those meetings I mentioned, and be a part of every aspect of it pretty much, you know. that was very difficult. Of course, you're going to be tired. So, and I didn't think about so much fear about all of that because I knew how it always took a lot out of him, because he's doing everything.
Although Sugarfoot could see how tired MJ was, he never assumed it was because of any serious sleeping problems. And per his words, he was completely unaware of MJ's sleeping issues until the Conrad Murray trial. Personally, I don't fault him for that. Not a lot of people knew about Michael's sleep issues. Back when we went over Travis Payne, he said that his relationship with Michael wasn't to the same degree as, say, Karen, Bush, or Tompkins. And I think the same applies to Sugarfoot. He was very close with Michael, of course, but not close enough to know the small intricacies of MJ's life. People knew he was tired, but they probably didn't know he was suffering badly with insomnia and utilizing propofol to sleep. I don't think anyone would have naturally known or assumed that. So, to answer Jermaine's question, why didn't Sugarfoot call him or Jackie? I'm assuming it's because at the time, he didn't believe anything was dire enough to warrant a call. He just chalked everything up to MJ working hard on all these different things, not touring in about 12 years, and trying to find his footing again. Like many others, I think he just assumed MJ would build stamina, get used to the schedule, and rise up to the occasion. However, ultimately, that was not the case.
What I'm trying to say is, yeah, he had some impairments. I could tell something was wrong, but then he come and kill it the next day. So what I'm saying is, if he was totally dysfunctional and torn down, you wouldn't have a This Is It film, would you? There would be nothing good enough to produce a This Is It film with. So there was enough of him there that he was trying to rebuild, as you remember, get himself back together from a hiatus of touring since '97, and enough of him to rebuild to give you enough great footage to do This Is It. Now he's pulling himself back together. He may not have been the right on point on everything, but he was good in a lot of things, enough for the world to appreciate that film. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
A lot of things I wasn't privy to know that I didn't know it was going wrong or going on. So I was blinded to that until the trials. Yeah, but what I saw him on some days, and I saw him some days troubling to me. I was worried about him, but I knew he was tired. And I thought about it. I was trying to figure it out. I said, man, Jonathan, he got to do all the other things, work with all the elements of the show. Of course he's tired. I had to rationalize it that way, not thinking and knowing, because I didn't know he was sick or not sleeping or taking that stuff. So, my rationalization said that he's doing all these other things, meetings and rehearsals and stuff. That's why he was tired.
Now let's move on to another longtime member of MJ's tour entourage, Daryl Finnessy. Daryl provided backing vocals on all 3 of Michael's solo tours. He's also worked with legends like Rod Stewart, Lionel Richie, Whitney Houston, and Stevie Wonder. And fun fact, if there are any Frasier fans out there, he actually co-wrote the show's theme song. My assumption is that Daryl was hired around late April or early May 2009. In an interview with Red Jackson, vocal director Dorian Hawley, who also worked on all 3 of Michael's solo tours, mentioned that the vocalists were the last ones brought on, whereas the band and dancers had already been hired a month or more earlier. Dorian was the one who called Daryl to come audition for This Is It. He had to audition since there was a new musical director, Michael Bearden. Don't worry, he's next.
But I remember feeling for This Is It, after all of that stuff has happened, like you said, some stuff happened before history, between history and This Is It, that long period. I just remember when I saw Michael, he gave me a hug, and just the way that he looked at me during rehearsals, that he would look over our way. There were a few of us who have been there through all of the tours. And you could see, not that Michael did not show appreciation for me for being on, of any of the things. I think it's just my own personal thing, But I just remember, first of all, just thinking, wow, I am so happy to be a part of this. And for the first time, I felt like I am helping Michael emotionally and psychologically by being one of the ones who's been there and got his back. I just remember that was my personal feeling about This Is It. It was all more personal for me, It's not that I worked any harder or any different. I just felt more supportive of Michael for This Is It.
The thing about both Daryl and Dorian is that, to my knowledge, they haven't really spoken openly about the darker moments surrounding This Is It. Neither of them seemed particularly privy to the deeper behind-the-scenes issues, like Michael's exhaustion, him not showing up for rehearsals, or any moments where he seemed incoherent. I think that's for 2 reasons. One, much like Sugarfoot, their relationships with Michael were primarily professional. Sure, they probably joked around here and there, but they kept it respectful and work-focused. And 2, out of love and loyalty to MJ. I genuinely don't think either of them want to contribute to the narrative of anything negative surrounding MJ, and perhaps it's easier for them both to only discuss their joy for working with him and the positives. I believe the only time Dorian in particularly talked about This Is It was in 2009, a week or so after MJ had passed. In the interview, he talks about MJ being in good shape, but he's specifically referring to that final rehearsal on June 24th.
The first thing that people ask me, my friends who call and ask, was Michael sick? Was he weak? Was he ill? Was the absolute opposite of that. He was very energetic. He was happy. He was even more playful than he normally was at rehearsal.
When you were with him and you were rehearsing on that evening, what was he like? Was he tired? Was he lethargic? Was he upbeat? Can you describe for us what it was like to be with him?
He was great. I was told when I came on and I started auditioning singers that he was working out every day. He was dancing. His schedule was he'd work out in the morning. He'd get with the dancers, and then he'd do vocal lessons. And he was there every day, which is different from the way it's been since I've worked with him.
By now, we know that the rehearsals on June 23rd and 24th were the best Michael had had in weeks, so I don't fault Dorian for what he said here. But it's long past time we stop spreading the narrative that Michael was vibrant and healthy throughout the entirety of the This Is It rehearsals. Do I believe he had good days? Absolutely, but it's equally as important to acknowledge that MJ also had bad days, and people worried about him being able to rise up to the occasion. Finally, let's discuss Michael Bearden.
MJ was vibrant, he was happy, he was healthy, he wanted to do this tour, and that he loved everybody.
Now what did I just say? And you know, that wording he chose, it sounds awfully familiar, don't you think?
We want the world to know, okay, how happy and how vibrant and how engaged and connected he was in this endeavor.
Yeah, it's giving copy my homework and change a couple of answers if you ask me. Bearden actually first met MJ in 1993 in Mexico at one of his shows. He said he was working with Madonna at the time, and they all went to see the show. He went backstage, said hello and all that, but MJ and him didn't officially work together until the 30th anniversary special. Aside from MJ, Bearden has an extensive resume and has worked with hundreds of artists, including Sting, Lady Gaga, Lenny Kravitz, and Whitney Houston. Bearden was apparently on MJ's shortlist of musical directors, and he received a call in approximately April 2009. In an interview from 2011, he stated he was initially reluctant to accept because he had been a musical director for so many stars and wanted to pursue other musical endeavors, but decided to explore it because it's Michael Jackson. Duh. I first met with the This Is It director Kenny Ortega. We had a great meeting, and he invited me back down that evening to meet with MJ. I asked that there be keyboards in the room when MJ and I met. When they finally brought MJ in to see me, I was already playing around on the keyboard. He walked in smiling broadly with pep in his step. Instantly, he started dancing and swaying to me playing Workin' Day and Night. We hugged and began talking about what he was looking for, and I told him what I was looking for. I interrupted him several times to have him sing songs as I played them. To his credit, he did, and we had a great bond immediately. We did a concert for about half an hour, just him and me. As I was leaving, I asked him for the set list, and he just laughed. They were looking at a few more guys after me. He said, "God bless you," and I left the room. I wasn't even home good before I got the call to be his musical director. I had a private gratitude moment and went right to work learning songs. After joining the project, to my knowledge, he was responsible for choosing a lot of the band. Now, the main thing people think about in regards to Bearden is that infamous scene in the This Is It film where he and MJ are discussing The Way You Make Me Feel. This is where he says my favorite thing, you know, you gotta let it simmer, bathe in the moonlight. There are some fans that think Bearden was trying to come for MJ's neck. You know, clock his tea a little bit. But that clip is what's been commonly referred to as creative jousting. Many people seem to think that me and MJ didn't agree in that moment. Not true. We were having a creative joust, as we called it. MJ had a strong opinion, and so did I. We laughed and hugged at the end of it, and you can see the mutual respect and love in the film. I have never been one to just be a sycophant and bow down to everything the artists say. Why else would you hire a musical director? Just hire a person to execute what you want to have happen and go with that? MJ MJ was brilliant in that he always wanted to grow and push boundaries. He would always tell me to push him, so that's what I did. I have no problem doing that with any artist I work with. That's the way it was with MJ and me, and that's the way it is. We saw eye to eye and then pushed our vision even further. The results are always better with that approach. It was all done in love. Like most of the people involved in the band or anyone in the production who had a lot at stake, since Bearden was the musical director, supervisor, composer, and associate producer for the This Is It film, he's kept his comments about the rehearsals pretty neutral. In that 2011 interview, he had this to say when asked about people feeling reluctant about MJ being able to complete the 50 concerts. Who are these many people, and were they at the same rehearsals I attended? I'm always amazed at people who talk in full confidence with no advantage of first-hand knowledge, obviously basing their opinions on hearsay and rumor. Look, it's difficult to say if MJ would have completed all 50 dates or not. He was never one to mark when he worked. He always went full out every time I worked with him. A couple of his brothers did express surprise when they saw an early cut of This Is It. They couldn't believe that was MJ full out like that. They told me he always used to try to save it for the show. I guess MJ felt he had something to prove. In my opinion, he was well on his way to doing it too. There's no way to fake what he did in This Is It. That was MJ doing what he did best. He was working his way back up to being show ready those last few nights. He was on, and he knew it. I don't see any reason why he would not have made it through those dates. He even talked about the possibility of extending the tour in another country. That said it all to me. First of all, notice how he didn't answer the question but said it's difficult to say if MJ would have completed all 50 dates or not. He was never one to mark when he worked. What does that even mean? Plus, if there's anything we've learned while telling this tale, it's that the emails don't lie. People's mouths do. During Kenny Ortega's AEG trial testimony, an email from June 16, 2009 was shown from Bearden to him and Travis. In it, Bearden states that MJ couldn't even sing live and dance at the same time yet. Hey guys, on MJ's lead vocal re-sings, I'm not sure if we're going to get what we need in time. I'd like to try to get some alternate takes or unprocessed leads from the vault if we can. I can go in with M-Prints and remix the stuff we need on the 22nd, our proposed media day. If we can get everything we need from the vault, I can use what we have and take out ad-libs and such to try to make it new. MJ is not in shape enough yet to sing this stuff live and dance at the same time. He can use the ballads to sing live, get his stamina back up, and once he's healthy enough and has more strength, I have full confidence he can sing the majority of the show live. His voice sounds amazing right now, he just needs to build it back up. So you're telling me that 18 days out from opening night, MJ couldn't sing and dance at the same time and was still trying to build his stamina back up, and they're getting vocals from the vault? And 3 days after that email, that lands us on June 19, 2009, the day Kenny was so frightened by MJ's condition that he sent him home. But he was fine, right? Happy, healthy, vibrant? Don't piss me off. First off, thank you to everyone who came out and auditioned. Final callbacks have been selected and will help carry us into part 3. In the role of the doctor, we have Dr. Arnold Klein, Nurse Cherilyn Lee, and Dr. Conrad Murray. In the role of the chef, Kai Chase and Douglas Jones. As the personal trainer, Lou Ferrigno. As MJ's personal assistant, Michael Amir Williams. For security, Alberto Alvarez and Faheem Muhammad. On Team MJ, Kenny Ortega, Travis Payne, Karen Faye, Michael Bush, and Dennis Tompkins. And from the band, we've got Jonathan Sugarfoot Moffat, Daryl Finnessy, and Michael Bearden. Despite how I feel about Karen Faye, during her AEG trial testimony, she said something that rings true. Everybody was lying after he died, saying that Michael was well and everybody knew he wasn't. Everyone we've gone over has their own version of the story. Some said Michael seemed tired but believe he would have risen to the occasion. Others said his need for psychiatric and medical help was so urgent that if someone didn't intervene, he was going to die. And some have stayed comfortably silent, even after all these years. Amongst all these versions, somewhere lies the truth. And that truth is that this was entirely too much for Michael to handle in such a short amount of time, just like Lou Ferrigno said at the very beginning of this video. So many people talked about how rushed the production was and how little time there was for rehearsals and pulling everything together. Despite that, MJ tried to persevere, but the expectations placed on him just kept growing and getting louder. So much so that no one heard the cries for help. No one heard Karen Faye Faye's pleas. No one heard Alif Sankey begging for someone to do something, and no one cared to step in for a man who was deteriorating right in front of them. And because of that, in part 3, you'll see a man who is completely savable lose his life as we dive into the final 3 months of Michael Jackson's life, April, May, and June 2009. This part was intense, y'all. How are we doing? So please, let me know your thoughts in the comments, and go ahead and show your girl some love down there as well. Savages need love too, darling. Please check out Luna Joe / Jolanda's Michael Jackson What Did Happen After June 25th series, TeamMichaelJackson.com, which stopped existing in the middle of my production. Yikes. DailyMichael.com, MJJCommunity.com, the r/Michael Jackson subreddit, JacksonDynasty.net, and VindicateMJ.wordpress.com. All of these sources have been an amazing help. Of course, all source material is at the link in the description. If your work was featured in this series and not credited, please let me know, and I will document it accordingly. To keep up with updates as the series comes out, or to keep up with updates on yours truly, darling, follow me on my socials, Elon's app, aka the artist previously known as Twitter, Instagram, and Threads at _Hannah Savage. I do also have a Blue Sky, and it is linked in the description. You can also check out the community tab on my channel for updates as well. And I'm just saying, we turn up on Instagram, as the kids say.
I be getting Barbara Walters and Diane Sawyer confused. The last one was Barbara. This is Diane, right? I don't know. She's not dead, so I can't make jokes about her being dead. But you know, I bet that trick is next, wherever she is, if she ain't dead. Is she dead? Is Diane... Alexa, is Diane Sawyer dead?
Diane Sawyer is still alive.
I post exclusive sneak peeks you guys on YouTube may not see, as well as get the chance to interact with you and do polls and reactions and all that fun stuff.
Look, sir, this isn't it. Somebody come.
Also, hit up the super thanks if it tickles your fancy. It's your way to give a savage some change without doing anything strange. Cause we trying to buy more MJ books out here. Don't feel obligated to donate though. I appreciate you if you do, and I still appreciate you if you don't, because I know it's hot out here and these bills have been mighty disrespectful. Thank you so much for watching and for your patience with me getting this series out. Hannah does all her own stunts and still works a day job, so it takes a bit of time. And also, we just recently hit 7,000 subscribers and I'm gagging! We really on the road to 10K, which is insane. I never thought this many people would subscribe and watch me talk about the Hee Man for over 3 hours straight. Y'all are some real ones. I'd also like to give a special thanks to the MJ Cast, Red Jackson Dance, and @ShaySoDangerous on X, as her thread on Karen Faye was very helpful. Thank you again for watching, and I will see y'all on the dark side in part 3. I know I said that last time, but like, for real this time. Okay, bye.